Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Angela Allen. In early 2012, Angela Allen was a 16-year-old high school student living in Van Buren, Arkansas. She was known for her positive and kind nature and was very religious, attending church regularly. Angela had a passion for children and dreamed of pursuing a nursing career in the future, with the goal of working in a hospital. She also loved animals and was always optimistic about life. Angela grew up in a dysfunctional family. Her father was abusive to her mother, but fortunately, he did not harm the children. However, he abandoned his family and had no contact with Cecilia or his children. After he left, Cecilia became involved with another man, who turned out to be cruel. She endured years of abuse from him. Later, Cecilia became addicted to illegal drugs and alcohol, which eventually resulted in her losing custody of her children. Cecilia did not want her children to be placed in foster homes or boarding schools. Cecilia eventually agreed to let her mother adopt Angela and her brother. Although Cecilia visited them frequently, they were unable to develop a close relationship. Cecilia's mother was determined to provide her grandchildren with everything they needed. Although she was retired, she took on a part-time job to earn extra money. She raised the children in a loving environment, hoping they would receive a good education and become independent. Despite their efforts, finances were tight, and they had to save a lot. The children understood their situation, did not ask for much, and appreciated their grandmother's care. During her school years, Angela dreamed of having a computer and a mobile phone. She wanted to connect with friends on social networks and play games like other children her age. Angela often felt jealous of her friends who had these devices. However, she understood that her grandmother could not afford them, so she never pressured her to buy expensive things. Angela was usually modest, influenced by her strong religious beliefs. Nevertheless, every time she went to church, she prayed for a smartphone. Finally, her prayers were answered. On her 16th birthday, her grandmother saved enough money to buy her a modern mobile phone. Angela was so excited that she quickly created an account on social networks. Almost every day, she made new friends. However, this naive girl did not realize the potential dangers of sharing her phone number with strangers. Angela often received calls from unknown numbers, even late at night. This situation worried her brother, who was more aware of the potential dangers. He realized that Angela's naivety could put her in danger. One time, her brother answered a call from a stranger. The caller turned out to be a 30-year-old man to whom Angela had given her cell phone number via social media. Angela's brother threatened to report the man to the police if he did not stop contacting Angela. He reminded the caller that Angela was only 16, prompting the man to hang up. A stranger wanted to meet Angela, but it was clear that he had bad intentions. The situation worsened when Angela misrepresented her age on social media. In the photos, she looked older, which meant that the men did not realize they were talking to a minor. This led to a serious argument between Angela and her brother. Her brother then told their grandmother about the situation, and she spoke to Angela, explaining the potential dangers and the intentions of these strange men online. Angela began to understand the risks involved in her behavior and realized that it was not safe. She promised her grandmother that she would avoid such situations in the future. On the evening of February 10, 2012, Angela told her grandmother that she was going for a walk, which was her normal routine, as she usually liked to walk before going to bed. While her grandmother did the housework, Angela went for a walk. After a while, her grandmother fell asleep. When she woke up, she was shocked to see that Angela had not returned from her walk. She began to panic and went to the police to report Angela missing. She explained to the police that Angela had left the night before and had not returned home all night. The grandmother sensed that something was wrong because Angela had never been out this late before, and it was unusual for her to run away. They had not argued, and all of Angela's belongings were still at home. The police quickly arrived at Angela's grandmother's house, where they found her distressed and pleading for help in finding her granddaughter. She provided a photo and description of Angela, as well as details of what she was wearing when she left. Several patrol cars searched the area but found no trace of her. By this time, many neighbors had learned of the situation and joined in the search. Some spoke to the police to offer their assistance. Unfortunately, no one had seen Angela that night, so they were unable to provide any information about the direction she had gone. Angela's grandmother described her usual walking route, and the police checked several times but found no signs of an attack or any clues as to Angela's whereabouts. Days passed without any progress on the case. During this time, everyone in the area knew that Angela was missing. The local community grew increasingly concerned because there had been no ransom demands. She had not contacted anyone, and her social media accounts showed no activity. As the crucial 48 hours passed without any updates, the hope of finding Angela alive diminished. However, her grandmother remained hopeful until the very end. The FBI was brought in to assist in the search for Angela. Agents first focused on her social media accounts. They checked her cell phone and, surprisingly, over the weekend after her disappearance, Angela sent several text messages to family members, including her mother, brother, grandmother, and a friend. In these messages, she claimed to have a new boyfriend and said that she had left with him in a black Chevrolet Camaro to a nearby town about 2 hours away. She asked them not to bother her. The messages sent from Angela's phone raised suspicions. Her grandmother believed that the messages were written in a way that did not match Angela's usual writing style. She suggested that the messages may have been sent by someone else who was trying to distract the search. After sending those messages, Angela, who was usually very communicative, stopped responding to friends and family, which was completely out of character for her. FBI agents discovered hundreds of contacts, including Angela's relatives and friends. After reviewing the information, they noticed a man who had recently contacted Angela, which led to suspicions of his involvement in her disappearance. Lloyd Jones was brought in for questioning and was found to have a history of violence against women. During the investigation, FBI agents discovered numerous communications between Lloyd and Angela, indicating that he had been trying to convince her to meet for some time. Lloyd was considered strange, especially in his interactions with girls. In 2001, he was convicted of abuse after breaking into the home of a woman he had been stalking. He attacked her, threatened her life, and abused her before leaving the scene. The victim reported the incident to the police, resulting in Lloyd being sentenced to 10 years in prison. He was paroled after serving 7 years for good behavior. In February 2012, Angela, who had been communicating online with Lloyd for a long time, suddenly disappeared. The police suspected Lloyd of being involved in her case. Lloyd claimed to live in the same city as Angela. He said he was only 1 year older than she was and was studying at a nearby school. Their online friendship developed into a romantic relationship. He tricked Angela, gaining her trust to obtain intimate photos of her, but he didn't stop there. The day before Angela went missing, she received an invitation from Lloyd to meet on the evening of February 9, 2012. When Angela left home for a walk, she was dressed up and had put on makeup. She didn't tell her grandmother that she was meeting someone, but when she returned, she acted strangely. She seemed worried and was crying, but she didn't explain why. The following evening, Angela went missing. During questioning, Lloyd confessed that he had met Angela online, where they developed a friendship and eventually agreed to meet in person. He stated that she had claimed to be 19, which made him feel comfortable meeting her. On the night they met, he picked her up in his car near her grandmother's house. However, he began to suspect that she might be younger than she had said. After a brief conversation, Angela revealed that she was actually 16. This worried Lloyd, who feared that he might get into trouble with the law, so he asked Angela to get out of the car. They only drove a short distance before he dropped her off, and he did not wait for her to return home. He claimed that he never saw her again and insisted that he had nothing to do with her disappearance. It was clear that Lloyd was not telling the truth. Analysis of the text messages exchanged between Angela and Lloyd showed that she quickly admitted her true age of 16, and he did not dispute this. This meant that he knew her real age. When confronted with this contradiction, Lloyd began to avoid the question, claiming that he could not remember that part of their conversation. He suggested that he might have missed the text message. During questioning, he continued to adjust his story and eventually recalled that Angela had called her friend before leaving the car. He claimed that a few minutes later, a black Chevrolet Camaro pulled up and she got into it. This was the car mentioned in the text messages from Angela's phone. FBI agents and police were skeptical of Lloyd's claim. To determine whether he had indeed sent the messages on Angela's behalf, they needed to analyze their communications in more detail. Some parts of the conversation were redacted, but an agent was able to reconstruct the conversations. Police discovered a history of Lloyd's online activity that began long before Angela went missing. He targeted young girls, trying to lure them into meetings. He had attracted several victims. Police interviewed some of these girls, and one confirmed that she had met Lloyd online. They had been communicating as friends for a while, and he seemed nice to her. In reality, he had taken advantage of her loneliness as she was going through a breakup at the time. Unfortunately, she agreed to meet him, which led her to a warehouse where she was attacked. After the attack, Lloyd threatened her for a long time, using photos to intimidate her into silence and prevent her from contacting the police. The police do not believe that Angela went to see Lloyd willingly. Lloyd tricked Angela using a method he had successfully employed before. Evidence also indicated that he used some photos and attempted to arrange a meeting with her. After the first meeting, Angela did not want to continue the relationship. It was unlikely that she would have willingly gotten into his car. He probably knew that she had a habit of going for walks before bed and waited for her near her house. Lloyd's story kept changing. He began to provide new details about Angela and her friend. He claimed to have heard that Angela and her friend were planning to go to the Arkansas River. This information was verified, and he was found to be lying. The police went to Lloyd's house and, with his permission, searched the premises. They discovered that he lived there with his girlfriend, who insisted that she did not believe he had kidnapped Angela. She claimed that on the day Angela went missing, Lloyd was busy working in a warehouse near their home and had no time to go out of town. The police were particularly interested in the warehouse because he had attacked another victim there. Lloyd was reportedly laying floors on the day Angela went missing, and his girlfriend was convinced of his innocence because he came home covered in dirt and construction materials. The police requested items for forensic analysis, and Lloyd's girlfriend provided what they needed. They found traces of dirt on his pants and jacket, but his shoes were suspiciously clean, leading the police to believe he had changed them. After mapping the location of the warehouse, the police noted that it was also where Angela's cell phone had last been active. The police decided to search the warehouse, hoping this would help them find Angela. When the police and Lloyd's girlfriend arrived at the shed, they immediately noticed a disturbed area of land behind the building. The land belonged to Lloyd, but they needed official permission to conduct a thorough search. Lloyd initially agreed, but he later prohibited digging in that particular location. The police brought specially trained dogs with them, and one dog signaled near the disturbed area next to the shed, which was unusual. However, the police could not take further action without a warrant. Several police officers interviewed neighbors who may have seen something on the day Angela went missing or afterward. However, no one reported anything unusual. Some neighbors said Lloyd had been on the land for a long time, which was not unusual since he usually worked in his shed. The police then had to leave. Given the situation, it was important to act quickly before Lloyd could destroy any evidence. The police managed to obtain a warrant in a very short time. The next morning, the officers quickly returned to the scene with the necessary documents and specially trained dogs. They suspected that the Angela was no longer alive. The police focused on a specific area that had interested them the day before and began digging through half a meter of loose soil. Forensic experts discovered a metal plate, and the search dogs became excited as they approached a steel plate. Underneath it, they found a blue plastic barrel that had been buried and sealed. It appeared that the barrel had been placed there recently, as the soil above it was still fresh and loose. The police then dug up the plastic bin. Inside, they found a body. The body was in poor condition and was immediately taken to the forensic lab, where the victim was identified as Angela Allen. The forensic expert concluded that she had been abused and that the cause of death was strangulation. Her grandmother needed psychological support to cope with the tragic news, even though the body did not require identification. On the day of Angela Allen's funeral, 16-year-old Angela was buried in the city center, attended by hundreds of people. There was now an urgent need to bring the killer to justice. The suspect, identified as Lloyd, had buried Angela on his property. DNA evidence linked Lloyd to the crime, confirming that he had strangled Angela, as indicated by marks on her neck. Although some time had passed since the murder, the cold February temperatures and the burial helped preserve much of the evidence, including the DNA. During a visit to his father in prison, Lloyd confessed to the crime. This confession was recorded and added to the case file. Lloyd's girlfriend later told the police that when he returned home that night, his clothes and shoes were covered in dirt and blood. She didn't think much of it at the time, but he must have discarded them afterward. With the overwhelming evidence against him, Lloyd's attorney didn't even attempt to argue for his innocence. Instead, the defense focused on the idea of an unintentional crime. During the trial, Lloyd changed his testimony. He admitted that he went with Angela because she wanted to watch the sunset. When Angela revealed that she was only 16 years old, he became upset. In a fit of rage, he pushed her into the river. After a while, he realized that she was not coming up for air. When he pulled her out, he discovered that she had drowned. However, this was all a lie. The medical examiner confirmed that Angela had not drowned. There were clear signs of strangulation on her body, and there was no water in her lungs. It is unclear why he chose to fabricate such a false story. Nevertheless, this obvious deception only strengthened the jury's belief in Lloyd's guilt. The prosecutor presented their version of events during the trial. Angela and Lloyd's first meeting took place on February 9. Angela, a teenage girl, had dressed up for a date with someone her own age, but became frightened when she encountered an adult man instead. She refused to get in his car and go home with him, which upset her. Lloyd was determined not to give up. He tried to convince her to meet again. When his attempts failed, he resorted to threatening her by saying that he would share her private photos with all the students at the school. Terrified, Angela agreed to meet him, but this time, she would not survive. He attacked and abused her, then strangled her. The jury quickly returned a verdict. Lloyd Jones was sentenced to 60 years in prison for Angela Allen's death, without the possibility of parole. He was also sentenced to an additional 30 years, which included 10 years for desecration of a corpse and 20 years in prison for using inappropriate photos of minors. However, things changed. After serving just 4 years of his sentence, Lloyd escaped. At the time, Lloyd was incarcerated at a correctional facility in Brick, Arkansas. He regularly worked at a construction site, where he gained the respect and trust of others. Eventually, Lloyd escaped. Angela's family was notified in time, as they were potential targets. Every available resource was mobilized to capture him. Residents were informed through the news on radio and television, and updates were spread via text messages and social media. Police searched the area for 3 days and eventually found Lloyd, who was hiding in a wooded area near the prison. He was arrested again and returned to prison. He is currently serving time in a maximum security prison in Arkansas. Angela's family was devastated by her loss, and the unexpected escape of the criminal caused widespread concern. The grandmother felt guilty for not paying enough attention to her granddaughter, not checking her social media messages, and trusting her own judgment. She realized that she had allowed this criminal into their lives. Driven by a desire for justice, Angela's grandmother led the effort to create a petition called Angela's Law. The law requires closer monitoring of abusers. It has successfully passed through all necessary channels and is now in effect. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Daniel Wozniak. Costa Mesa, California, is located between Los Angeles and San Diego on a coastal plateau overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Despite being an affluent area, it still retains the laid-back atmosphere of a beach town. No one expected this picturesque location to be the site of Julie Kibushi's tragic fate. Sam Har's parents, Stephen and Raquel, were worried when they realized they hadn't heard from him in a while. Sam was scheduled to visit them that weekend, but he never arrived. On May 22, 2010, his parents Stephen and Raquel went to Sam's apartment. When they arrived, they witnessed a horrifying scene. Stephen, in a panic, quickly called 911. During the call, he informed the police that there was a dead woman lying face down in his son's bedroom, her clothes partially torn and blood dripping from her forehead. "Do you know where your son is?" the dispatcher asked. "No, I don't," came the reply. But there was no sign of Sam anywhere. The case shocked the Costa Mesa community, where homicides are extremely rare. When police arrived at the apartment, they found no evidence of a struggle. The apartment was neat and showed no signs of a struggle. The space contained typical bachelor items like empty beer bottles, used cigarettes, and an outdoor grill, all of which were relatively clean and tidy. Until they entered the bedroom. In the bedroom, police found an unused knife on the nightstand and several books, including a fighting manual and another titled The Wonders of Sex. The most alarming discovery, however, was on the bed. It was covered in the victim's blood. The dead woman was lying partly on the bed and partly on the floor, her pants down, exposing her lower body. Police believe she may have been sexually assaulted before her death. She died of 2 gunshot wounds to the head, one to the top of her head. Although there was a knife on the nightstand, it did not appear to have been used. Curiously, she was wearing a crown, and the back of her sweater read, "All yours." Her purse was in the kitchen, and her driver's license identified the victim as 23-year-old Julie Kibushi. Julie was born on Valentine's Day 1987 to Japanese-American parents Jun and Masa Kibushi. She was the third of their 4 children. Her parents often called her "my Valentine girl." From an early age, Julie developed a strong interest in dance and music. Her mother said that Julie started tap dancing at the age of 5, and her passion for the sport continued to grow over the years. According to her friends and family, she was a very cheerful person. Her cheerful and bubbly personality brought laughter to everyone. She radiated positivity and often helped her friends when they were in trouble. While respecting her Japanese heritage, she also pursued a free-spirited, all-American lifestyle. After graduating from the Orange County School of the Arts, Julie pursued fashion design at Orange Coast Community College. There, she formed a close relationship with 26-year-old Sam Har and even tutored him in anthropology. Little did she know that her kindness would eventually lead to her tragic fate. As the police investigated the crime scene, they attempted to discover what happened to this energetic young woman, Julie. The evidence clearly pointed to Sam as her killer. Since she was found in his apartment and he was now missing, the police needed to dig deeper into Sam Har's life. Sam Har was born on May 29, 1983, in Los Angeles, California, to Stephen and Raquel Kalberman. As an only child, he received a lot of affection from his parents. His father was a special education teacher while his mother stayed home. Sam had a close relationship with his parents and visited them often. Sam was large and athletic, and friends described him as a big teddy bear. As a child, he enlisted in the United States Army, serving a tour of duty in both Afghanistan and Germany with the 173rd Airborne Division. After 3 years of service, he was discharged and returned to Southern California to take advantage of the GI Bill and finish college. Sam aimed to finish college and then re-enlist in the Army as an officer. Sam enrolled in Orange Coast Community College there. He became friends with Julie, who was 3 years younger than him. However, after 3 years in the Army, Sam developed PTSD, a common condition among veterans. Police wondered if he had lost control and committed the crime in a moment of intense emotion. When Julie was found dead in Sam's apartment and he was missing, detectives suspected that he had fled the scene after the murder. The situation became more suspicious when they discovered text messages on Julie's phone from Sam. At around 2:45 p.m. on May 21, 2010, Sam texted Julie to say he was going to help a friend and then come to his parents' house. However, just 2 hours later, his text messages changed. He contacted her multiple times, begging her to come over. The urgency in his messages made it clear that something was wrong. Concerned about her friend, Julie agreed to visit him, expressing her willingness to support him as family. Sam's messages showed that he had planned her visit. Furthermore, Sam's car and passport were missing from the apartment, leading the police to suspect that he was trying to evade arrest. With both his passport and car missing, it seemed that Sam would soon be identified as the killer. However, the police would soon discover that the situation was more complicated than it appeared. Back in 2002, when Sam was 18, he was charged with the murder along with 17 others in the stabbing and beating death of 19-year-old Byron Benito in Canyon Country. On January 15, 2002, Sam, who had known Byron since childhood, picked him up and took him to a location behind a mobile home park where a group of suspected gang members attacked and killed Byron. Although Sam was charged with murder, he was eventually acquitted, but this did not ease the police's suspicions of him. Sam's family believes in his innocence, but the police believe they are after the right suspect. Since Sam is trained in the use of firearms, he will be armed. Fearing that they are dealing with a dangerous criminal, the police issue a warrant for Sam's arrest. Meanwhile, Costa Mesa police begin monitoring Sam's cell phone and credit card transactions to find him. They learn that he has made 4 ATM withdrawals since his disappearance. Additionally, his credit card was used at a pizza delivery restaurant in Long Beach, California, just 20 miles from Sam's home. The police hoped to find Sam on surveillance footage, but when the bank provided the ATM recording, they were shocked to see a teenager in a hoodie and baseball cap withdrawing money from Sam's bank account. Neither the police nor Sam's parents were able to identify the teenager. Police believe he may be helping Sam escape or hide. Costa Mesa police are eager to find him. On May 26, 2010, police learned that Sam's credit card had been used at another pizza delivery service and began tracking the delivery driver. After obtaining the delivery address, they rushed to the location, thinking they had finally found Sam's hideout. However, when police raided the home, they did not find Sam, but instead found 17-year-old Wesley Freelich and several of his friends. Despite being suspected, Police immediately ruled Wesley out as a suspect, but he still had Sam's credit card on him. Wesley shared a surprising story that police did not expect. He revealed that he had received a credit card with instructions to withdraw cash, but that the card was not given to him by Sam, and he said Daniel Wozniak, a local stage actor Wesley met through community theater, had given him a credit card. Daniel claimed to be a bail bondsman who needed to collect money that Sam owed. While most people might have refused, Wesley saw Daniel as a brother and, not realizing the severity of the situation, agreed to help. In total, $1,900 was withdrawn from the account. Daniel Wozniak's name came to the attention of the police when they discovered an invitation to Daniel's upcoming wedding in Sam's apartment. But who is Daniel really, and what is his relationship to Sam? Did he help Sam escape, or was he involved in the murder? Many questions remain unanswered. Daniel Wozniak, born March 23, 1984, is the youngest of 3 brothers. Because his parents worked long hours, he spent a lot of time with his grandparents after school. Growing up in a wealthy family, Daniel and his family often went on lavish vacations. He was considered a good student at school, getting top grades most of the time. He used pranks, singing, dancing, and magic tricks to attract people's attention. He loved being the center of attention. Realizing that he had a talent for performing on stage, Daniel began acting and singing in musicals in his early 20s. He was quite open-minded about his plans for the future, but was never able to hold down a job for long, forcing him to move from job to job with very low pay. However, he kept his passion for acting and continued to participate in theater. It was in one of these musicals that he met his dream partner, an actress. After a short period of dating, they decided to marry on May 26, 2010. The police found Daniel while he was celebrating his bachelor party in Huntington Beach, California. He was related to Sam Hart because they lived in the same apartment complex. The police suspected that Daniel may have helped Sam escape or hide, or that he was involved in Julie's murder. With an arrest warrant in hand, the police interrupted Daniel's bachelor party. His expression changed when he saw the police, and they took him into custody for questioning. In the interrogation room, Wozniak initially claimed that his only crime was participating in credit card fraud and covering up for Sam. He explained to the police that he and Sam had planned to drain his bank account with Wesley's help, and then claimed that he had stolen the credit cards. However, Daniel claimed that before they could carry out their plan, Sam made a shocking confession. He added that after this confession, he dropped Sam off at a local shopping mall and had not seen him since. However, the police believed that he was still covering for Sam and that he had more to do with Julie's murder than he had told them. The police changed their approach by taking a DNA sample from Daniel, which made him appear nervous. As he tried to remain calm, the police sensed that something was wrong. Almost immediately, he began adding more details to his statement. The police asked, "Can you explain what happened to Sam?" Daniel replied, "I told him I needed to move some objects in the theater. I said, 'Lift this up,' and as he bent down, I grabbed the gun. I had never fired a gun before, so I pulled the trigger and shot him." The police realized that Daniel is worried that his DNA might be found at Sam's apartment, despite his attempts to downplay the issue. Under pressure, he continually changes his story. After a brief silence, Daniel says that he knows about Julie's murder and that he helped Sam escape. When the police remind him that they have his DNA, he insists that it does not match anything on Julie's body, insisting that he had nothing to do with the murder. The police expect him to share more information, but he abruptly decides to end the interview. Knowing the seriousness of the situation, the police press him for more information, warning that he will be arrested for accessory to murder if he does not come clean and give them full details. Daniel also has a lot at stake. He has a wedding scheduled in just 48 hours and he does not want to miss it. Under pressure, he began to collapse, causing the situation to change. The police, noticing his distress, rushed into questioning by falsely claiming that they had found his DNA on Julie's body. In reality, it took weeks for the DNA test results to come back, but Daniel did not dispute this claim. Instead, he explained that his DNA was present because he had been right above her. When his fabrications were exposed, he made a startling confession. This alarmed the police because initially only one gunshot wound was found at the crime scene. It was only after an autopsy that a second gunshot wound was discovered. Daniel's confession meant that he had been present when she was killed, making him an accomplice to the murder, allowing the police to formally arrest him. Even though Daniel was in custody, the police still needed to locate Sam, and Daniel remained silent as they searched for clues about Sam. While in prison, Daniel called his fiancée, Rachel Buffett. When Rachel chose freedom over love, she told him that she would speak to the police about the case. Daniel knew that he had to talk to the police before Rachel did. Suddenly, he panicked, desperate to reach a deal with the police that he had refused to do just hours before. But what he told the police this time was beyond their imagination. The story begins on May 21, 2010, when Daniel asked Sam to help him with a task, moving some boxes in the attic of a theater at a local military base. While Sam is busy moving the boxes and his back is turned, Daniel suddenly pulls out a gun and shoots Sam in the head. At first, Sam doesn't know what happened, but when he realizes he's been shot, he begs Daniel for help. Without hesitation, Daniel loads the gun and shoots Sam a second time, killing him on the spot. After killing Sam, Daniel proceeds to send Julie messages from Sam's phone, inviting her to Sam's apartment. Without any remorse, he leaves Sam's body in the attic and spends the night laughing, singing, and dancing, as if he hadn't just taken an innocent life. That night, Daniel returns to the apartment, and when Julie arrives, he shoots her twice in the head. He then staged the crime scene to make it appear as if Sam had attacked and killed Julie before fleeing. Daniel was also determined to hide Sam's body. In a desperate and gruesome act, he returned to the loft and cut off Sam's hands and head to conceal his identity. He dumped the body in a nearby park. Despite these horrific actions, Daniel returned to the theater as if nothing had happened. Police later found photos from the film's parties showing him laughing and joking with other members of the crew. The motive for these shocking murders was even more disturbing. It was all about money. Daniel had been struggling financially for a long time and was facing eviction, having been 2 months behind on his rent. He also had no way to pay for the lavish wedding honeymoon he had planned. When Daniel discovers that Sam has $62,000 in savings from his time in the military, he makes the cold-blooded decision to kill 2 innocent people to fund his lavish wedding and vacation. When the police discover the backpack containing the evidence Rachel mentioned to Daniel, it becomes clear just how damaging its contents can be. Daniel's brother, Tim, was told to get rid of the backpack but instead threw it over the fence at their parents' house. The backpack contained a number of incriminating items, including Sam's financial information, passport, bloody clothing, and most importantly, the murder weapon. Daniel's DNA was found on these items, placing him solely responsible for the murders of Julie and Sam. The evidence was overwhelming, including DNA, spent shell casings, and the victims' financial records, everything the prosecutor could possibly need, including the murder weapon itself. On December 16, 2015, after a trial that lasted just 5 days, Daniel Wozniak was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder. On January 11, 2016, after just 1 hour of deliberation, one of the shortest death penalty trials ever, the jury recommended the death penalty for Daniel Wozniak. On September 23, 2016, the judge sentenced him to death. It seemed there was no end to the deception in this case. Years later, police discovered that Daniel's ex-fiancée, Rachel Buffett, not only knew about the murder plots, but also lied to the police. Although she denied all charges, she was arrested and charged with 3 felony counts of being an accessory after the fact, based on allegations that she had repeatedly lied to the police. On September 12, 2018, she was convicted of 2 of those charges, carrying a maximum possible sentence of 44 months. On November 8, 2018, she was sentenced to 32 months in prison and was released from prison in about 2019. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Deborah Jeter. Deborah Jeter was born in 1976 in Georgia, USA. She was raised in a loving family and since childhood had a passion for helping people. When it came time to choose a career, Deborah decided to become a nurse without hesitation. She enrolled in a local college and pursued her nursing education. Alongside her studies, Deborah also focuses on building relationships. Deborah's boyfriend is a young man named Lester Jeter. They began a romantic relationship, and later both decided to move forward with married life. After marriage, they had 2 children. Their first child, named Kern, a year later, they had a second child. Because of their close age gap, the siblings were very close and did everything together. After graduating from college, Deborah to work part-time as an anatomy and physiology teacher. She also joined an exchange program as a licensed professional nurse. From an early age, Deborah's daughters began experiencing problems. Deborah often shows aggression towards her children and sometimes she has no control over her behavior. In 2004, she was accused of physically assaulting her eldest daughter, Kirsten, during a quarrel. However, this was the first and only incident of such behavior, so the charges were eventually dropped. As a result of this incident, Deborah was briefly hospitalized in a psychiatric facility and then underwent rehabilitation. She was diagnosed with several disorders, which were the cause of her depression. The experts concluded that Deborah's unusual behavior was linked to her mental disorders. The doctors reported that she managed to get these issues under control after receiving therapy. However, some of Deborah's neighbors believe she is still having difficulty controlling her behavior. Her frequent aggressive outbursts affected her husband and children, and she often acted impulsively. She would yell over anything, which was alarming. The situation seemed serious, as the police were repeatedly called to her house. However, every time the officers arrived, she would calm down. After the incident with Kirsten, Deborah avoided contact with the children. Each time, when the patrol officers would arrive, find nothing amiss, and leave after advising her to remain quiet and calm. Although there were numerous complaints about her loud and hot-tempered behavior, the officers felt powerless to intervene. This situation took a toll on her family, who bore the brunt of her aggression. Deborah's mental health issues seemed to get worse, leading to high tensions. Deborah's husband, Lester, struggled to endure the constant shouting and arguments. By 2009, the situation had become unbearable. In May, Lester decided to end the relationship and filed for divorce. Deborah was devastated. It seemed she genuinely loved her husband, but due to her mental health difficulty, so she was unable to control her behavior. Lester's decision to divorce was a significant shock for Deborah. She repeatedly tried to convince her husband to heal their relationship and discuss their issues. However, Lester was so frustrated with Deborah's behavior that he rejected any talks. Lester openly told his wife that their family had no future and he would never come back. He also mentioned that he intended not only to end the marriage but also to seek custody of the children. Lester was genuinely concerned that his wife might lose control when he wasn't around their daughters, fearing she might harm them. His worries were justified as Deborah's behavior became increasingly erratic. Lester worries about the safety and well-being of his 2 daughters, Kelsey and Kirsten, but he cannot predict the tragic fate that will befall them. That same month, after Lester declared his intention to divorce, Deborah attempted to end her life. She ingested a lethal dose of antidepressants, but was saved by the doctor's quick response. The most distressing aspect of this incident was that Deborah did this in front of her daughters, making her husband even more worried about her mental health. He feared that the stress of the divorce could worsen Deborah's illnesses. Unfortunately, resolving the legal issues of divorce is time-consuming, making the divorce process complicated and difficult. Nevertheless, Lester was determined to proceed with the divorce to protect the children from their unstable mother. Deborah's mental health issues clearly worsened after her divorce proceedings started. She and her children moved in with her mother. Naturally, Deborah suffered the most, but her frequent outbursts of anger and constant aggression also affected the children. Lester wanted to resolve all the issues quickly to minimize the trauma for the girls. Unfortunately, time was not on his side. Deborah attempted to end her life, which was a shock for the children. They couldn't understand their mother's behavior or the struggles she faced. Meanwhile, Deborah, at 30 years old, risked losing everything she had built with her husband over the years. Her world was falling apart, so it was no surprise that she was deeply shocked. Lester was determined to take action. He understood how serious Deborah's problems were and the danger she posed to herself and others. After Deborah's attempted to end her life, Lester insisted that her contact a psychiatric care center, believing she would receive professional help, an accurate diagnosis, and appropriate treatment there. Deborah took his advice and was admitted on May 22, which came as a great relief to Lester. During her treatment, the children stayed with their father, Lester. He also attempted to obtain a restraining order to keep the children away from their mother. During this time, Lester decided that he should seek full custody of both children. He believed Deborah was unable to control herself and tried his best to ensure the children's safety. Lester has repeatedly applied to court to limit Deborah's meeting in contact with the two girls Kirsten and Kelsey. It was expected that she would not be discharged from the hospital after just 2 weeks. Lester believes that such a short period of treatment was not enough for Deborah to control her behavior, so she remains a threat to her children. However, she was discharged on June 4. By this time, Deborah had not succeeded in gaining full custody despite her efforts. The judge denied issuing a restraining order to limit Deborah's communication with her daughters, considering it excessive. The judge believed the children were not in danger because she had received treatment. A temporary arrangement was made where Deborah would have custody of the children on weekends, while Lester would care for them on weekdays. The day after the custody hearing, on a Friday, June 5, 2009, Deborah planned to pick up the kids around 6 p.m. Although Lester doesn't want to be away from his daughters, he had to comply with the court orders. He had no choice but to hand the children over to Deborah when she arrived to take them for the weekend. Kirsten and Kelsey were happy to see their mother despite her previous rejections. Kirsten and Kelsey genuinely loved her, missed her, and enjoyed spending time with her when she was in a good mood. The eldest daughter, Kirsten, even posted on social media that she would see her mom the next day and expressed her excitement. However, they had no idea of the horrors that awaited. It seemed like a long-anticipated reunion, and Deborah was also eager to see her daughters. During a conversation with Lester, she mentioned that she had a big surprise planned for the children. In reality, a terrible plan had formed in Deborah's mind, which she intended to carry out. Instead of going home, Deborah drove with the children for a while and arrived at an abandoned house near Highway 77. It was a strange and eerie place to take the children. But the girls trusted their mother and followed her, eagerly anticipating the promised surprise. They were impatiently waiting for their mother to organize a special event for them. However, after they entered the house, Deborah pulled out a weapon. Kelsey quickly realized what was happening, but it was too late. She managed to shout to Kirsten to run away. However, Kirsten didn't listen, she charged at their mother. trying to take the knife to protect Kirsten. The struggle was unequal. Deborah stabbed her youngest daughter Kelsey several times. Kelsey was already down, and the eldest daughter Kirsten was desperately fighting with their mother. She pleaded for her to stop, shouting, "This is madness," but Deborah seemed oblivious, ignoring her pleas. Having dealt with Kelsey, Deborah turned on Kirsten, who tried to escape. Deborah struck her, but the wounds were not as deep. The girl began to bleed heavily. Despite this, she clung to life, begging her mother to stop and spare her. Kirsten expressed her desire to live, and perhaps this plea helped Deborah finally regain her senses. She halted the attack and began pacing nervously around the rooms of the abandoned house. In a state of shock, Deborah called the rescue service and confessed that she had killed her child, saying multiple times that she had done so and apologized for her actions. When asked for her location, she informed them that she was in an abandoned house on Highway 77 and mentioned that one of the children was still alive, urging them to hurry and call an ambulance to save the one who wasn't dead. The dispatcher inquired about her name, but Deborah refused to disclose it, stating that she would not reveal her identity. She was pacing around the house, while Kirsten was still alive and pleading for help. Deborah was overwhelmed and couldn't explain what had happened. She asked the dispatcher not to shoot her, stressing that she didn't have a gun. She gave precise directions to the location so law enforcement and medics could find the abandoned house where she had harmed Kirsten and Kelsey. Deborah said one of the girls was already dead, and the other was barely hanging on, as she had cut her throat and was bleeding. She urged them to arrive as quickly as possible, otherwise, the girls' chances of survival were slim. Deborah spoke calmly to the dispatcher, despite being a bit excited. Her voice was generally calm and cold. The dispatcher found Deborah's behavior strange and began to suspect that she had no control over the situation. While waiting for law enforcement, Deborah alternated between calmness and shouting nervously, even insulting the dispatcher. The operator remained composed, continuing the conversation to prevent Deborah from doing anything reckless. Deborah mentioned that if they didn't hurry, she might lose control and harm her second child. She said this completely calmly and without any emotion. The dispatcher realized the situation was extremely serious and that Deborah was unstable. Deborah, who had mental health issues, spoke about her daughters as if they were objects, one whom she has eliminated from her life, while the other is in danger. However, this did not particularly bother Deborah, as she was mainly concerned about her own safety. Deborah repeatedly asked the dispatcher to ensure that the police wouldn't shoot her when they arrived. Although she understood the seriousness of the crime, her focus was on her own well-being, even though one of her daughters is dead, and the other daughter is barely alive. This thing was inconsistent with recent when she tried to end her life, which occurred shortly before the tragedy. However, Deborah clearly did not want to suffer. But is she ready to take responsibility for her actions? The police arrived at the scene and found Deborah on the street, still talking on the phone. She raised her hands to show she had dropped the knife and was unarmed. She repeatedly told the officers not to shoot her, insisting she had no weapons, was not dangerous, and would not attack. Deborah directed the police to an abandoned house where 2 bloody bodies were found inside. Although Deborah was a nurse, she did not attempt to help the children. While speaking to the dispatcher, she walked around the abandoned house and then went outside to avoid seeing the girls' bodies. Deborah wandered around the courtyard while Kirsten sat in blood next to her dead younger sister, Kelsey. Deborah's car was in the garage of the abandoned house, with a small knife on the car roof, the same knife she used to commit the massacre. The police quickly found the knife and arrested Deborah, placing her under constant surveillance due to concerns she might try to harm herself. Inside the abandoned building, officers encountered a horrifying scene. They discovered 2 girls. One of them, Kelsey, was in the bathroom, covered in blood. Because of her injuries, she died at that moment, having bled out in less than a minute. Kelsey was only 12 years old, and her mother had stabbed her with such force that she succumbed to the bleeding almost instantly. It's hard to imagine what Kirsten went through. She was found with similar injuries in the bedroom, but was still alive when rescuers arrived. Kirsten lay in a pool of her own blood, her eyes indifferent, indicating she had lost a big amount of blood. Quick action was crucial to save her life. Her throat was cut from right to left, damaging her airways and one of the main arteries. Surprisingly, her mother, Deborah, a nurse, attempted to clamp the wound to stop the bleeding while waiting for the medics. This may increase her chances of survival. In an emergency situation, the doctors rushed Kirsten out of the abandoned house and took her to Parkland Hospital in Dallas. They performed an emergency operation and battled to save her life for hours. Miraculously, the girl survived. After 4 days, Kirsten was moved from intensive care to a regular ward. Her recovery was incredible, especially since it was initially thought she wouldn't make it. However, her challenges were far from over. Though she narrowly escaped death, a more troubling fact was that she and her sister were found in that abandoned house, having been attacked by their own mother. It's hard to comprehend the extent of the post-traumatic shock Kirsten experienced. During the summer, she was recovering from the operation, trying to come to terms with the fact that her younger sister Kelsey is dead and the fact that her mother was a murderer. At the time of the crime, Deborah lived with her mother in the small town of Malacca, Texas, which had a population of just 2,000 people. Investigators reviewed Deborah's cell phone records and discovered that after taking the children from their father, Deborah headed to Malakoff. There, she seemed to wander along the roads for a while, then she eventually stopping the abandoned house. Detectives believe Deborah was searching for a place to harm the children. Examining the actions of people with mental disorders is difficult, yet the incident in the abandoned house provides disturbing things into Deborah's motives. When life falls apart, depression and mental issues can lead some women to feel that ending their lives is the only option. In many cases, they kill their children first, believing it to be a merciful act. Under the strain of mental illness, a mother may think that her family's collapse will doom her children to endless suffering. In this mindset, she views murder as a way to free them from pain and hardship. Often, these women then take their own lives. In this situation, it's evident that Deborah had no intention of dying. She was frightened and did not harm herself, even fearing that the police might shoot her, showing that she valued her life. The murders of Kirsten and Kelsey were clearly motivated by revenge, intended to hurt Lester extreme pain. She aimed to deliver a cunning and cruel blow to him. The incident was truly alarming. Kirsten and Kelsey's father, Lester, tried to give this case a big push to draw attention to the trial, literally the day after the judge refused to issue a restraining order against Deborah. Instead, the judge agreed at the hearing that she would have custody of her daughter by the end of the week. This decision later raised many questions about whether the judge considered this decision reckless. Unfortunately, Lester's worst fears were confirmed. Deborah killed Kelsey and almost took the life of Kirsten. Lester tried his best to convince the judge that his daughters were in mortal danger. Under no circumstances were they allowed to see Deborah unsupervised. However, the judge maintained that their main goal is to strengthen and unite families, encourage parents to cooperate with each other, to ensure children receive love from both parents. This decision ultimately led to devastating consequences, but the judge's actions were still deemed legal, despite the tragedy that followed. The district attorney stated that it's not fair to blame only the judge for this situation. According to him, responsibility belongs to many parties: the doctors who allowed Deborah to leave the hospital, Lester, along with Deborah. Deborah was expected to face severe punishment due to her past actions. She had previously shown anger and aggression towards her children, including attempting to harm Kirsten. However, the decision to lift the prohibition order on her is still controversial and raises many questions. Generally, in 99% of cases, shared custody benefits children, allowing both parents to support, love, and communicate with them, fostering healthy development. Yet, this approach fails when a parent has serious mental health issues. Child Protection Services claim they were unaware of Deborah's behavior. Staff stated that if they had known about her try to end her life in front of the children, she would never have been allowed unsupervised contact. From that point on, people also focused on the possibility that the family had clearly become victims of leniency on the part of the mental hospital and the justice system. However, this could not be proven. It was known that Deborah had been in and out of such institutions multiple times, with discharges that came too soon. A comprehensive diagnosis typically requires at least 3 months of testing and observation. Treatment and medication may be prescribed based on test results, but their effectiveness is not guaranteed. Doctors then closely monitor the patient's condition, behavioral changes, and the progression of the disease, adjusting medication as needed. This process can take up to a month. And discharge is only considered after a stable improvement in the patient's condition. However, Deborah was released after just a few weeks, suggesting that she did not undergo the full range of required examinations and tests. Deborah promised Lester that she would take Kirsten and Kelsey out and give them a surprise. She wanted to plan a fun evening with activities like singing and reading. However, just 4 hours later, she called emergency services and confessed to killing her children. Her trial lasted a year, and on May 27, 2010, Deborah Jeter was formally charged with aggravated murder and attempted murder. Throughout the proceedings, Deborah was held in prison due to the high bail, which was unaffordable and reflected the severity of the crime. As a result, she remained behind bars until the start of her trial. Deborah's defense team proposed a deal to the prosecution due to the complexity and sensitive nature of the case. Prosecutors fear that Deborah's mental illness could lead to her being released without jail time. Furthermore, a full trial would require Kirsten, Deborah's daughter who had miraculously survived her mother's attack, to testify in court. To spare Kirsten the trauma of reliving the horrific incident, Deborah agreed to plead guilty to a lesser charge, hoping to avoid the death penalty under Texas law. About a year after the murder, Lester and Kirsten visited Deborah in prison. Deborah explained that, due to the turmoil in her life at the time, so she genuinely believed killing her youngest daughter Kelsey was the only way to protect her children from future suffering. She thought that the family's breakup would cause everyone immense pain and, in her mentally unstable state, she saw the murder as the only solution, a twisted form of salvation. Deborah expressed regret about what happened, but she admitted that she still hates Lester and blames him for the tragedy, and she will never forgive him. Kirsten reminisced warmly about the past with her mother. They talked calmly and even laughed together. This was the last time Deborah could peacefully meet with her loved ones. Afterward, she was moved to another prison and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. In her situation, this is seen as a lenient punishment because, without admitting guilt, she could have faced the death penalty. Lester was deeply shocked by the incidents, but inspired by his daughter, he decided to move forward. In 2015, he rebuilt his life, remarried, and he and Kirsten removed their social media profiles. Eventually, Kirsten reactivated her account but set it to private. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Vashti Sekat. At approximately 4 a.m. on April 30, 2011, Brett Sekat called 911 for assistance. He informed the police that his wife had taken end your own life and that she had also set fire to their house. Their 2 young sons, aged 2 and 4, were asleep in their bedroom at the time of the incident. Brett was able to save them but wanted to go back into the burning house to rescue his wife. The police advised him to stay where he was and not to go back inside because of the fire, and instructed him to keep an eye on the children. The police were then dispatched to their location. When firefighters arrived at the home and extinguished the fire, they discovered a woman dead. Her body was lying on the left side of the bed, with her arms and legs bent. In a state of anguish, Brett described what had happened in more detail. He explained that his wife, 34-year-old Vashti, had called him to help while he was sleeping on the couch on the first floor. He told her to take their children from the second-floor nursery and bring them down. She followed his instructions in a semi-conscious state. He believed his wife was unwell and that their children in the next room were disturbing her. Suddenly, he heard a loud slamming of the bedroom door, followed by flames coming from upstairs. Worried by the strange noises, he went upstairs to check on her and found his wife unconscious on the bed, bleeding. He held her tightly, but she was unresponsive. When he tried to lift her up to get her out, the flames around them made it impossible. Brett decided to prioritize saving the children. He went downstairs, got his sons out of the house, and put them in a car for safety before calling 911. He suspected his wife had set fire to the bed and shot herself while he was on the phone. Ignoring police warnings, he went back into the house to save her. Covering his face with a wet towel, he carefully moved into the smoky darkness, but the flames forced him to retreat. He believed his wife suffered from depression and dark thoughts, which may have led her to set herself on fire. He felt guilty for not being able to help her, but he was unclear about her motives for these tragic events. Despite her troubling thoughts, she was primarily concerned about her children's safety. This concern led her to ask her husband to take them away before she took her own life. However, the reason for starting a fire afterward remains unclear, and no one seems to have an answer. When police examined the scene, they discovered several intriguing details. They found a canister of gasoline next to the bed, suggesting that the fire was deliberately set. The position of the gun raised several questions. It was found under Vashti's body with the barrel pointing downward, which made it unlikely that she could have shot herself in that way. Police searched through her purse and discovered a note listing various expenses. The first item on the list was funeral, with an amount of $15,000 next to it. Other expenses included a mortgage, a car, and education, all categorized as life insurance. This suggests that the Vashti may have planned for her death and specified which expenses her life insurance would cover. On the passenger seat of Vashti's car, her notebook was located. Inside, there was a handwritten note filled with distressing messages. "She can't do this. She can't fight this. Take care of our boys. Be nice to Brendan. Talk to Bronson and support them both, letting them know that Mommy loves them. Every night I take care of Bronson is so wonderful. Mommy is so proud of you. Be a good big brother, Brendan. Stay strong and never lose that smile. I love you both and will watch over you from heaven." Neighbors shared some details about the situation. One neighbor, who couldn't sleep that night and was watching TV, reported hearing gunshots around 3:15 a.m. She noted that Brett didn't call 911 until 3:57 a.m., which raised questions about why he waited 42 minutes to seek help. Vashti's body was sent for an autopsy. A forensic pathologist determined that the cause of death was a gunshot wound to the head and confirmed that her death was not due to fire or smoke, as these occurred later. She had additional gunshot wounds to her chest and thighs. A toxicology report found no signs of alcohol or illegal substances in her system. A few days after Vashti's death, a funeral was held in front of the house where the fire had started. Family, friends, and local residents attended the ceremony. While Vashti's loved ones reflected on her life, her siblings, Kathleen and Rich, harbored doubts about what had really happened. They suspected Brett, and Kathleen quickly dismissed Brett's explanation as improbable. Kathleen, Rich, and Vashti lived in different states but remained close, frequently calling and visiting each other. Their loved ones were aware of the issues and conflicts in Vashti's marriage. Brett's comments after his wife's death were shocking. A large portrait of Vashti hung over the fireplace in their home. When her sister approached the photo to offer her condolences, Brett looked at Kathleen with irritation and expressed that he didn't want to discuss his wife. This response surprised the family members. Upon hearing about Vashti's death, her brother and sister contacted the county sheriff, insisting that she could not have taken her own life. They urged the police to treat the case as a potential murder and conduct a thorough investigation. The Rich and Kathleen closely observed the Brett's actions and shared valuable information with the police. By this point, the police, who sensed something was seriously wrong with the case, had begun to look more deeply into the lives of the Brett and Vashti. They appeared to be a happy couple who had been together for many years. They started dating in school, where Vashti was known as the school beauty and Brett was a promising athlete excelling in wrestling. They were very much in love and got married after a few years of dating. The couple held their wedding in Belize in 2004 and later settled in Brett's hometown of Kingman, Kansas, a small, friendly town with a population of just 3,000. There, they bought a house and started a family, welcoming 2 sons. At the time of the tragedy, their eldest son, Brendan, was 4 years old, and their youngest, Bronson, was 2. Friends and neighbors viewed the family as exemplary, unaware of the issues they faced behind the closed doors of the family. Brett often praised his wife to friends, yet he had concerns about her excessive dedication to her job in the HR department of an advertising agency. She frequently worked late, which bothered him. He struggled to understand why she felt the need to work so much, especially since he earned a decent income as a police academy instructor and could support the family comfortably. In contrast, Vashti valued her independence and wanted to help with the family finances. She was successful in her career and truly enjoyed her work. Brett believed that Vashti's emotional struggles were heavily influenced by her work-related fatigue. She was experiencing burnout and depression, feeling that life had lost its meaning. It was revealed that her boss had been concerned about her health prior to the tragedy and discovered she had hormonal imbalances. Vashti was prescribed hormonal supplements intended to help her lose weight naturally. But these medications have side effects, including fatigue, irritability, and anxiety, which may have contributed to her depression. Vashti's relatives said she suffered from depression. She had recently started seeing a psychologist, and after November 2010, she and her husband began attending family counseling to address the problems in their troubled marriage. Vashti had changed a lot. Previously a cheerful and sociable leader, she had become withdrawn and sad. It is possible that her emotional state contributed to her decision to end her life. However, new developments soon came to light. As her marriage struggled, she considered divorcing Brett. Family counseling sessions were ineffective and their list of grievances only grew longer. Frequent arguments took place, pushing their relationship to the brink of collapse. Vashti's relatives said that she often spent time alone and sometimes went out with friends just to avoid being at home and seeing Brett. Despite this, she and Brett continued to attend family counseling, and she also had separate sessions with the same therapist. However, Vashti's relatives could not accept that she would choose to die. They believed that she loved life, her children, and her family too much to take such a drastic step. Although there were challenges in the marriage and feelings of depression, they were not overwhelming. Additionally, they found it hard to believe that she could have started a fire in the house, putting her young children's lives at risk and leaving them without shelter. This idea seemed illogical to them. How could a loving and caring mother do something like that to her sons? Relatives shared that she would wake up every morning at 4 o'clock to prepare nutritious breakfasts for her children. She avoided store-bought baby food, choosing instead to make her own purees from fresh vegetables and cook wholesome porridge for them. When she learned that a boy in kindergarten had been diagnosed with cancer, she took it upon herself to support his family by raising funds for his treatment. She baked pancakes, sold them, and donated the proceeds to the boy's family. Everyone around her was convinced that such a mother would never abandon her children. Police considered both accounts of the incident. They considered the possibility that Brett might have been involved in the case. Police reviewed Brett's call. When they called 911, they found that Brett's voice sounded cold, emotionless, and distant, which gave the police the impression that he didn't care. According to the investigation, the police discovered that Brett isolated Vashti and the children from relatives and friends, limited communication, and considered his wife and children as his property. Vashti could only talk to family and friends when he was at work. Otherwise, he would get angry if anyone called her in his presence. The Brett exerted complete control over his family. The Kathleen described Brett as a narcissist and an abuser. He was strict not only with his wife but also with his sons. The Brett believed that even at a young age, boys needed to be treated harshly to become strong men. He never allowed his children to show weakness and often resorted to physical punishment. Brett trained them from an early age and taught them to fight. His harsh parenting methods caused tension within the family, contributing to the breakdown of the marriage. Finally, Vashti felt it was time to leave. A few days before the tragedy, Vashti met with a lawyer and filed for divorce. She wanted custody of the children but was open to them spending weekends with their father under her supervision. Although she was sad about the divorce, she would be free from Brett control for a long time. He had been controlling her since the beginning of their relationship. Vashti had big plans for her future, including a trip to Hawaii with her sister, tickets to a concert of her favorite band, and other travel plans. Without Brett by her side, she took charge of her life, focusing on healthy eating, exercise, and weight loss. She is in great shape and happy with the positive changes she has made. She recently went shopping with Kathleen and bought a lot of beautiful new clothes, which were still in the bags and with the tags still on at the time of the fire. She hasn't even had a chance to wear them. Those who knew Vashti sensed that something was off. It seemed impossible for her to abandon all her plans so suddenly. Despite feeling depressed, she remained excited and determined to move forward. However, she was unaware that her plans would never come to fruition. Just days before her tragic death, she served Brett with divorce papers, which infuriated him. Shortly after, she passed away. Could this have been mere coincidence? If she was indeed planning a divorce and preparing for a new chapter in her life while intending to raise her children alone, why would she choose to leave this world and abandon her beloved sons? This raised serious concerns for the police. The Kathleen informed police that Brett had consistently threatened his wife with violence and a lengthy divorce process. He had even warned her that he would take their children away if she decided to leave him. Out of fear, Vashti had put up with his behavior for a long time, but she could no longer tolerate living with her abusive husband and wanted to end their marriage as soon as possible. When Brett learned of the impending divorce, he was devastated and canceled a planned vacation with friends. He believed that threatening Vashti with taking away their children was the best way to win her back. He made it clear to her that he would do everything in his power to ensure she never saw her sons again, even if it meant moving them out of the country. This left Vashti very scared. That night, after receiving threats from Brett, she went to visit a friend. She then took the children away so that Brett would have time to think about where he was going. She believed that when she and the children returned, Brett would decide to leave and would not bother her with the children anymore. However, Brett had no intention of leaving. Instead, he was planning something. A few days later, Brett convinced Vashti to talk to him. He tearfully confessed to her that he wanted her to come back and asked for a chance to see the children he missed so much. When she asked why he hadn't moved yet, he replied that he had nowhere to go and asked to stay until he found a new place to live. Vashti was moved by Brett's words. Therefore, she returned home with Brett in the morning, but died that night. Police interviewed a therapist to learn more about the couple's relationship. The therapist revealed that Vashti had recently confided in her about threats from her husband, Brett. Just days before the tragedy, Brett had told Vashti about a dream he had in which he killed her, and he had promised that as a police officer, he could make it look like an accident or that she had left voluntarily. The therapist described Brett as a narcissist with latent psychopathic traits. In that situation, the therapist feared that Brett might harm his wife, and could not accept that Vashti would choose to end her own life. The therapist thought Vashti was too religious to do such a thing and believed that she would never abandon her children to their abusive father. Brett was called in for questioning and was asked directly if he had anything to do with his wife's death. He firmly denied any involvement and expressed that Vashti's death had shocked him deeply. He explained that he was struggling to cope, as he was now alone with their children and unsure how to live without his beloved wife. Brett acknowledged that their relationship had faced difficulties. The night before the tragedy, they had discussed their future plans and the possibility of dividing their assets in case of a divorce. He noted that Vashti had been very depressed, and he suggested that their conversation may have caused her to be so distressed that she chose to end her life. He felt guilty, believing that he may have hurt her, which may have contributed to her tragic decision. When asked about threats to Vashti's life, Brett claimed it was just a joke. He admitted that he tried to intimidate her to avoid a divorce, but insisted he would never harm her. When questioned about what might motivate Vashti to set their house on fire, he said she disliked it because they couldn't afford necessary repairs. Throughout the interrogation, Brett acted disrespectfully and aggressively, expressing anger over being questioned about his wife's death. He stated that it was her choice to end her life and that he was in no way responsible for it. Brett's account of the fire and his actions during the time do not match. He said he rushed into the burning room and hugged his bleeding wife in an attempt to save her. However, there was no blood on his clothes or body, and he showed no signs of burns, despite being in the middle of the fire. Shirtless, barefoot, and wearing only pants. It is unlikely that he would not have suffered blisters or singed hair, especially since he walked barefoot through the flames. This suggests that he never actually entered the burning room and was not being truthful about his account. Police suspected Brett of being involved in the crime, but they needed more evidence to arrest him and file charges, so they continued their investigation. Brett's pants, which he was wearing at the time of the fire, were taken for analysis. Tests showed traces of gasoline on the pants, indicating that he likely started the fire. A forensic expert confirmed that Vashti died when the house burned down, contradicting Brett's claim that she started the fire. Firefighters found multiple fires on the second floor of the home, indicating that someone had deliberately set the fire to destroy evidence of the crime. Police discovered that Brett had spent 40 minutes before calling 911, during which time he had taken steps to destroy any evidence. Investigations of his home computer and phone revealed numerous internet searches for how to destroy evidence before the incident. Forensic examinations from Podcherkesk revealed that the notes Vashti left behind were forgeries. The letters were slanted in the opposite direction and the handwriting did not match Vashti's. It is likely that her husband tried to imitate her handwriting but did not do a good job, possibly in a hurry. The test showed that the shot was fired from a point where Vashti could not have shot herself. There were no gunpowder burns on her body. Brett was not initially suspected of murder, so police did not test his hands for gunpowder residue. All the evidence pointed to Brett, and on May 14, 2011, he was arrested. He faces charges of murder, arson, and endangering the lives of children. The trial began only 2 years later. The prosecution presented clear evidence of Brett's guilt. The position of the gun did not match the circumstances. If Vashti had shot herself while lying down, the gun would have been on the floor. If she had shot herself while sitting, the gun should have been to her right side. Instead, it was found under her body with the muzzle pointing down, which was impossible. The bullet's trajectory was also questionable. Achieving that trajectory would require her to bend her arm almost completely and hold it away from her body. The lack of soot and smoke in Vashti's respiratory system and blood indicates that she was dead when a fire started, suggesting that someone else started the fire. During the trial, experts in handwriting, ballistics, and forensic science provided their testimony. There were no witnesses from the defense present in court. Brett denied all allegations, and his lawyer attempted to dispute the evidence linking him to the crime. The prosecution argued that Vashti's bedroom was where the crime took place. Brett shot her and then set fire to parts of the house. He got the children out to safety and called 911 from the second floor. The prosecution believed that the motive behind the crime was his refusal to get a divorce and share custody of the children. The jury deliberated for 5 hours. Brett Seacat, 37, was convicted on all counts, including first-degree murder, and Brett was sentenced to life in prison, plus 6 years and 3 months, for arson and endangering the lives of children. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Ellen Greenberg. Ellen Greenberg was born in New York on June 23, 1993, as the only child of Joshua and Sandy Greenberg. At the time of the events, she was 27 years old and living in Philadelphia. Ellen grew up in a family filled with love and was a cheerful, outgoing girl. In high school, she played softball and golf, excelling as a competitive athlete. She was well-liked and had many friends. Her mother said that she was a special person, able to connect people with each other. After graduating from college, Ellen earned a degree in communications from the University of Pennsylvania. Even so, she felt this was not her true passion. As a result, she took evening classes at the university and eventually earned a teaching degree. After completing her studies, she quickly found a job as a first-grade teacher in Philadelphia. In 2008, Ellen met Samuel Goldberg, the son of a famous family in the area. They started dating soon after. Deeply in love, they soon decided to live together. By 2011, they were engaged and planning to marry in August. Ellen was thrilled and joyfully prepared for the wedding, trying on her dress and sending out invitations. She had no idea that incident would soon take a strange and unexpected turn. On January 26, 2011, while Ellen was at work, Philadelphia had a major snowstorm, prompting the school to close early. Ellen returned to the apartment she shared with her fiancé, Samuel. At around 5 p.m., Samuel went to the gym, he unaware it would be the last time he saw Ellen alive. When he returned at 5:45 p.m., he found the apartment door locked from the inside. He knocked repeatedly, called Ellen's name, phoned her multiple times, and sent 9 text messages, but received no response. Then, he asked the security guard for help to break down the door, but the guard refused, citing rules against leaving post. Determined, he broke down the door himself. Inside, he discovered a horrific scene. Ellen was sitting on the kitchen floor, leaning against the cabinets, with multiple wounds. He immediately called 911. The operator instructed him to check if Ellen was breathing and to perform cardiopulmonary resuscitation. However, he noticed a knife stuck in her chest, preventing him from starting resuscitation. Tragically, Ellen had already passed away. When the police arrived to inspect the scene, they found that the apartment's entrance had not been forced, and inside, everything appeared to be in order, with no signs of a struggle. The door was locked from the inside, and the latch was secured in the usual way until Samuel broke it down, making it unlikely that an intruder had entered. The police also observed that Ellen's hands had no defensive wounds. Despite her multiple injuries, it seemed improbable that she had inflicted them on herself. Nevertheless, waiting for the forensic examination results, the police concluded that Ellen had ended her life, even though there was no note explaining her actions. Additionally, there were fruits on the kitchen table, indicating that Ellen might have been planning to make a fruit salad when she supposedly decided to end her life. The police took Samuel to the station to provide testimony. By this time, Ellen's parents had received the sad news over the phone. They lived in Harrisburg, a 2-hour drive away. When they learned that their only daughter had passed away, they completely collapsed. The very next day, information about Ellen's death has changed. The autopsy revealed she had 20 wounds, 10 on the front and 10 on the neck from the back. Medical examiners emphasized that these injuries showed that this was a murder. She also had bruises on various parts of her body, both recent and older, making it hard to believe she could inflict neck and head wounds on herself from behind. Especially because at least 2 of these wounds were almost fatal and left her unconscious. Additionally, it takes a great deal of force to cause these injuries, especially head injuries. She was found with a knife stuck in her chest after already sustaining 19 injuries. Could she have done all of this by herself? Despite the evidence that has been found, the police disagreed with autopsy officers' conclusion. Authorities announced that Ellen ended her life. They came to this conclusion because they found no signs of anyone else being there. The door was locked from the inside and the neighbors heard no strange sounds, only Samuel's screams. Additionally, DNA analysis of the knife revealed only Ellen's fingerprints. The bruises on her were explained by the police as injuries from playing sports, even though she had not participated in any sports for several years. Doctors also checked Ellen's mental health and learned from her parents that recently, she has been dealing with anxiety. She had been prescribed 2 medications, both known to have side effects that may cause negative thoughts or behaviors. However, her psychiatrist, Len, stated that she showed no signs of end-her-life thoughts. 2 weeks before the incident, when they met, she seemed fine. In addition, the psychiatrist said had never heard Ellen say that anyone had treated her cruelly. Her family also confirmed this. They described Ellen as a good-natured and cheerful. Her loved ones couldn't believe she would harm herself, as she was happy, preparing for her upcoming wedding, and had even tried on her dress and sent out invitations just days before the incident. Ellen's mother and friends admit that she has been feeling anxious and stressed due to work and wedding preparations. However, they consider this to be normal. The thought that she would harm herself just before her wedding was completely out of character. There was a conflict between the forensic medical examination, which ruled it as murder, and the police, who believed Ellen harmed herself. To resolve this, the doctor decided to send a sample from Ellen's spine to a neurologist at the Forensic Medical Examination Bureau. This was to verify the cause of death. Because if one of her severe neck wounds had penetrated deep enough to reach the spinal cord, causing paralysis, she wouldn't have been able to inflict further wounds. This indicated that someone else was responsible for Ellen's death. 3 months after the incident, the medical examiner retracted his murder hypothesis, suggesting instead that Ellen's neck wounds were not severe enough to cause paralysis and that she could have inflicted them on herself. Ellen's parents were not given a clear explanation for this change in the investigation's direction. They described Ellen as squeamish, noting that she avoided even piercing her ears a second time due to her low pain tolerance, making it hard for them to believe she could harm herself. Despite this, the authorities closed the case. Refusing to accept this decision, Ellen's family decided to pursue their own investigation. They hired top experts, including forensic specialists Kirill Klin and Henry Lee, to consider the evidence and the autopsy report. These experts cast doubt on the police investigation report that Ellen did this to herself. In 2012, Henry noted that the likelihood of murder Ellen is significant. Forensic pathologist Cyril Wecht pointed out that statistically, women rarely use sharp objects to end her life and seldom harm themselves through clothing. On the other hand, Bren, a seasoned detective, investigated Ellen's death. After reviewing the footage, Bren claimed to notice that the bloodstains did not match the position in which Ellen was found, as she was sitting and leaning against the kitchen cabinets. However, there was a trail of blood running horizontally from her nose to her ear, and the blood splatter on her shoes indicated that she was standing when she suffered the injuries. All of this led he to assume that the scene of the incident and the position of the body had been altered. Although Ellen's parents tried, the lawyer failed to change the version of incident, as it would have been necessary to present more compelling evidence. Therefore, the case did not progress and remained unchanged until 2015. Andre, an assistant attorney, did not officially take on the case. However, he was intrigued by the unusual circumstances and decided to review the file to understand what drove Ellen to her actions. Ellen's fiancé, Samuel, found her, and he told the police that the door was locked from the inside, which forced him to kick it open. Andre noted in a photograph from the scene that the lock was a simple hotel-style latch. This type of latch can be locked from both the inside and the outside by turning a screw. An analyst mentioned that this kind of latch typically cannot be broken by a kick without dislodging the door from its frame. Yet, the only damage observed on the door was a missing screw. Additionally, the police considered the fact that Ellen had no defensive wounds. It was unclear in which order her injuries occurred, but the final one was undoubtedly to the heart, where the knife was found. If one of the neck wounds had damaged her bone marrow, she would not have had any opportunity to defend herself. One of Ellen's head wounds, which indicated she was attacked from behind, caught Andre's attention. He raised these concerns with the forensic expert, who said a neurologist had examined Ellen and found no injury. He then asked for an official report to confirm there was no spinal injury, only to be told that no such report existed. It had been lost, suggesting it was more of a rumor that no one had substantiated. At the time, there was no neurologist in the Forensic Medical Examination Bureau, so Dr. Adams was brought in. She allegedly examined Ellen's spine and found no damage. However, it later emerged that no record existed of Dr. Adams being asked to perform this examination. In a 2018 interview, Dr. Adams claims that she did not examine Ellen's spine. Following this, Andre contacted a private investigator for the Greenberg family and recommended hiring a private neurologist. He discovered that Ellen's spine sample was still held at the Forensic Bureau, which seemed unnecessary. The family took this advice and hired Dr. Ross. He concluded in a report that Ellen's spinal cord was damaged by 2 severe wounds on her neck, making it impossible for her to inflict further injuries on herself. At the same time, Andre realized that the data the police had was provided by Samuel, Ellen's fiancé, who was at the scene. This was the only account of what happened in the apartment. Samuel said he had not been with Ellen for 45 minutes, and when he returned, he couldn't open the door. Neighbors said they heard Samuel screaming and calling Ellen's name through the door. Samuel said he became worried and started calling Ellen on the phone, sending her 9 text messages. When he got no response, he went downstairs to ask the building security guard if had any tools to open the door, but the guard refused to help. Later, Samuel claimed he went downstairs several more times, trying to persuade the guard to help him break down the door. In his official statement to the police, he said the guard was with him when he kicked the door open and entered. However, the guard told both the police and Ellen's family that he never left his post and did not accompany Samuel into the apartment. Additionally, the guard noted that Samuel, who claimed to have been at the gym, was wearing boots instead of sneakers. On the other hand, Samuel called 911 at 6:33 p.m., which means that an hour had already passed since he returned to the apartment and attempted to contact Ellen. This is very strange when analyzed. Let's think, he goes to the gym for half an hour. Later, when he returned home, he called Ellen to open the door, but she did not answer him. He shouts her name, tries to call her on the phone and sends her 9 text messages. How long should it take to realize that something is wrong? 10 to 20, maybe 30 minutes, but not an hour. Another strange thing that Andre discovered is that Samuel, before calling 911, made 2 calls, one to his parents and another to his uncle, who is a lawyer. Moreover, they arrived at the scene before the emergency services, and it was Samuel's parents who informed Ellen's parents about what happened. One thing is clear, no one would react in the same way as Samuel. Anyone would ask for help as soon as possible to try to save the life of the person they love, right? Andre listened to Samuel's call to 911, and he was surprised to hear Samuel speak in a calm tone. Even as Samuel said things like my God, his fiancée, there is blood, his voice remained steady. When the emergency services worker asked him to describe the situation, he ignored the request and instead talked about his trip to the gym and his return home. When they instructed him to perform CPR, Samuel asked, "Does he really need to do this?" After spending 2 or 3 minutes supposedly performing CPR, he suddenly told they that he had just found a knife stuck in Ellen's chest. Remarkably, although he was beside her the whole time, but before that he had not seen it. This was no small tool, but a 10-inch long meat cleaver. It was clearly visible. After discovering it, he told they that Ellen must have fallen on the knife. Following this, Samuel was taken to the police station to give a statement. He did so only in the presence of his lawyer and provided a very brief statement. After that, he refused to speak to detectives again, despite their repeated attempts to question him. It seemed there was no way to get him to talk. These things made Ellen's family believe that she was murdered. A neurologist hired by Ellen's family discovered a bone marrow perforation and also found signs of strangulation and bruising. However, many researchers reviewed the footage at the scene and were surprised to see only a small amount of blood. Ellen had 20 injuries, which raised suspicions that the crime scene may have been tampered with. However, the investigation did not conduct any crucial tests. The police did not even examine the trash after arriving at the scene. They simply observed and assumed she had died naturally, and without protecting the scene. Additionally, the day after this tragic incident, Samuel's uncle, cousin, and brother visited the apartment, supposedly to retrieve a suit. They took Samuel's laptop, Ellen's laptop, and her cell phone. The police only seized these items on January 29th, 3 days later. Upon examination, the laptops showed search queries about ending one's life. Yet, the official report filed in April 2011 did not mention these searches. Ellen's parents and friends slightly changed their views about Samuel after the incident. They never labeled he as a suspect or culprit, but they did have doubts. They realized they had noticed changes in Ellen's behavior weeks before the incident but didn't think much of it at the time. Her friends observed that she started consulting Samuel on every decision, which was unusual for her. Ellen, once a happy girl, had become worried and insecure. One day, she told her parents she wanted to quit her job and move back home. She assuring them it had nothing to do with Samuel and she was fine. Her parents told her she could come home whenever she needed and advised her to seek help for her anxiety. In 2019, Deputy Coroner and Dean of the Faculty of Health Sciences Gregory MacDonald presented a report supporting the police's version of incident. He stated that Ellen had inflicted superficial wounds on herself, as people often start with shallow cuts before going deeper. However, the deep wounds and marks that looked like signs of an attack also made him suspicious. After the incident, Samuel continued to contact the Greenberg family for a year, but their relationship eventually faded. He later sent them an email announcing his wedding. Today, he is married, has 2 children and lives a normal life, completely unrelated to the Greenberg family. The Greenberg family and their attorney have filed a lawsuit against the medical examiner who performed the autopsy and the Philadelphia County Coroner's Office to change and explain why the case was closed. In May 2020, a Philadelphia court finally supported their claim. The family hopes to receive the case file, which they were previously denied access to. There is also a CCTV video from the building. It does not show anything unusual, it only confirms the time Samuel left and returned to the apartment. They also asked to see the 911 call recording. These procedures were delayed, and the trial was rescheduled for 2021. If they win, the case will be reclassified and investigated as a murder. However, due to the time that has passed and the investigation's shortcomings, many clues have been lost forever, such as the luminol test. The Pennsylvania Attorney General's office closed the case in July 2022. The case has been transferred to the Chester County District Attorney's Office, which has assigned new investigators and a prosecutor to take over. This change was supported by Ellen's parents. They have always maintained that their daughter did not end her life. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Estibaliz Carranza. Estibaliz was born in September 1978 in Guadalajara, Mexico. Her father is Armando, a psychologist, journalist, and author of books on esotericism. Her mother is Angela, Spanish. In 1983, at the age of 5, Estibaliz left Mexico with his parents and younger brother, settled in Barcelona, Spain. Estibaliz had a fairly normal childhood, although her father, Armando, was very strict and not easygoing. Her father's anger made her think of ways to get rid of him. Despite this, he let her study at prestigious schools, and later supported her studies at the Autonomous University of Barcelona. As she grew up, she became sociable and had many friends. However, she also suffered from frequent mood swings and anger, during which she could become quite aggressive. As an adult, Estibaliz moved to Germany and lived in Munich for a while. She used her connections to find work, and she landed a job at an ice cream parlor in the nearby city of Nuremberg. She spoke German fluently, which helped her settle in easily, and her friendly demeanor made it easy for her to connect with the locals. While working at the ice cream parlor, she met her first husband, Holger Holtz, who sold refrigerators and was part of the Krishna religious community. He was 14 years older than she, and a few weeks after they met, he proposed to her because he was passionately in love with her. They soon married and moved to Berlin. Estibaliz found various jobs, but her life was not fulfilling. Right after the wedding, she and her husband Holger had a conflict. Despite his successful career, but he began to insult and physically abuse her. Nevertheless, they continued their married life, and in 2000, they relocated to Vienna, Austria. In Vienna, they had the opportunity to start their own business, opening the ice cream parlor Schlee Cherry on the busy Oswald Gas Street. The ice cream shop quickly became famous with the locals. Nearby was the Iman hairdressing salon, and at the end of the building's lobby, a staircase led to apartments on the upper floors. There was also a basement entrance located under the stairs. Estibaliz and Holger made a large sum of money. However, he asked her to reimburse him for all the expenses they had spent in the first year of opening the ice cream shop. Estibaliz, ice cream shop owner, dedicated herself to her work and grow her store successfully. Meanwhile, her husband Holger has an interest in weapons technology, which causes more conflicts between the two. He asked her to join his Krishna religion, but she felt it was quite strange. In the end, she decided to follow this religion. Estibaliz's business has allowed her to get to know many people, including several men. Over the years, she had several lovers, some with her clients, others with suppliers, tourists, or neighbors. One of them was Manfred Hinterberger, 48, a representative of a company that manufactures industrial equipment, such as freezers, refrigerators, and ice cream machines. After many years of knowing each other, she started dating Manfred in 2008. She decides to divorce her husband, Holger, but he will only accept if she pays him the debt she owes. Since she did not want to pay the debts, they decided to live together in a small apartment. On April 27, 2008, after finishing the shift at the ice cream shop, Estibaliz returned home. Then, she had a heated argument with Holger, during which he hurled insults at her and accused her of cheating throughout their marriage. In a moment of anger, he threatened to take drastic action. While he was seated at the computer, facing away from her, she took the weapon and attacked him. After ensuring he was dead, she moved his body to the bathroom and left it there. She was sure the gunshots would be heard by the neighbors, which meant the police would soon arrive at her house. However, nothing happened. After waiting until nightfall, Estibaliz moved the body to the living room sofa and went to bed. 2 days later, she attempted to dispose of the body by setting it on fire. However, the smoke escaping from her apartment attracted attention, and a neighbor called the fire department. When they tried to enter her apartment, she stopped them, claiming everything was fine and that she had simply burned her lunch. A few days later, Estibaliz considered buying an electric saw. Although she didn't know how to use one, the store staff helped her learn. Upon returning home, she began dismembering the body, placing all the parts, including the head, into a bag and storing them in the freezer. Later, she transferred the remains into empty ice cream containers and covered them with cement. Next, she moved these containers to her ice cream shop and stored them in the basement freezer, where they were eventually discovered. Estibaliz's main motive for the crime was her frustration with her husband, Holger, refusing to move out of their apartment, and he refused divorce. Additionally, she had financial debts to him that she wanted to avoid repaying. As time passed, she continued to live her life normally, and no one seemed to notice Holger's disappearance. They had only been living in Austria for a short time, so they had very few friends here, so no one asked about him. If anyone asked about she will mention that he went to India. The regular customers at her ice cream shop didn't notice any change in her behavior, and no one suspected anything. Estibaliz's relationship with Manfred grew closer, and eventually they moved in together. She asked Manfred for money to help her business, and he gave her over $100,000, allowed her access to his bank accounts. However, he also wanted she to spend more time with him and to enhance her appearance. To achieve this, he pressured her to get plastic surgery, which she did not want. She had dreams of becoming a mother, but since he already had children, he couldn't help her fulfill that desire. Their relationship took a turn for the worse when Estibaliz discovered that Manfred had been having affairs with several other women. Feeling betrayed, she plotted her revenge. In preparation, she took shooting courses to improve the necessary skills. After completing the lessons, she felt ready to take action. To avoid leaving any evidence, she covered the floors and walls of their apartment with cling film. On the night of November 21, 2010, Estibaliz and Manfred returned from a joint trip and had sex. Afterward, she confronted he about his infidelity, but he denied it and fell asleep. In a moment of anger, she grabbed a gun and attacked him on the neck while he was sleeping. She left his body on the bed for the entire day before moving it to the bathroom. Using an electric saw, she cut the body into pieces, this time doing so with more care and skill. Estibaliz couldn't find any cement, so she decided to store the body parts in a refrigeration unit in the basement. However, the unit couldn't fit the entire body, leaving her to hide most of the remains in her apartment, where she covered them with cat litter to minimize the smell of decomposition. After taking care of this, she continued with her daily routine. Meanwhile, Manfred's relatives began to ask about his whereabouts. Estibaliz told them that he had left for Thailand. They believed her story and stopped asking further questions. Shortly after, Estibaliz met Ronald, an Austrian man. He became her lover and the father of her unborn child. It seemed like her life was getting better. After all, she had managed to evade the consequences of her previous actions. Who would suspect that this charming and friendly woman, known by everyone as kind-hearted, was capable of such deeds? One day, workers repairing the building next to the Estibaliz ice cream shop entered its basement to access the sewer and discovered a damaged pipe. The building's common drainage system is located in the storage rooms, which are separate small basements used for storage. As they entered the basement, they smelled rottenness mixed with cat litter deodorant, which piqued their curiosity. They traced the odor to two large freezers that appeared to have been abandoned for a long time. When they opened the freezers, they were shocked to find containers filled with cement. Inside one freezer, they saw a hand and a leg, in the other, a head. They also discovered two rifles with optical sights, a woman's handbag containing a pistol, a beret, and a notebook with notes in Spanish. Terrified, they quickly left the basement. They informed the hairdresser next door about the discovery, urging her to call the police. When the police arrived, they searched the basement and found the remains of two dismembered bodies. One was in several pieces, while the other was just a severed head, all encased in cement-filled containers. The remains were sent to the forensic medical examination in Vienna. During the initial investigation, authorities were unable to determine who owned the basement. This was because the basement had not been used for a long time, and no other suspicious items were discovered. Investigators began to analyze the evidence they had collected. The next day, after the police arrived at the crime scene, Estibaliz came to work. A neighbor informed her about the discovery in the building's basement and mentioned that the police had started an investigation. This news made her extremely worried, forcing her to quickly return home. She locked the ice cream shop and put up a temporarily closed sign. As she left, her face betrayed her nervousness, looking very different from her usual demeanor. Naturally, her worried expression caught the attention of nearby residents, who began to mock her as she crossed the street towards the bus stop. They saw her take out her phone to make a call before getting into a taxi. Then, she went to the bank, withdrew all her money, and then purchased a plane ticket to Paris. However, she was never able to use this ticket. Austrian police were waiting for her at the airport. They were aware of the ticket she had purchased, but realized she had not checked in for her flight. Police issued a warrant for her arrest on Wednesday, June 8, 2011, after a search warrant was issued. Investigators believed the containers found in the basement belonged to her ice cream shop, but locating her became difficult since she had stopped using her mobile phone. Meanwhile, she remained in Vienna, took another taxi, and asked the driver to take her to northern Italy. She then traveled to the mountains and reached Basu, from where she continued on for another 6 kilometers to Talamadsu, where she decided to stay in a hotel for a few days. Before arriving, she asked the taxi driver to book a room for her because she couldn't do it herself. Later, the taxi driver saw her picture in the news and informed the police that he had driven her there. Unfortunately, by that time, it was already too late. In this city, Estibaliz stayed for one night before taking a train to Udine, which is 50 kilometers from Almaty. There, she met Ivan, a street artist, who noticed her crying at a cafe and offered his help. When he approached her to ask if she needed help, she told him about her problems, especially her husband's cruelty that forced her to leave home. Ivan invited her to stay in his apartment for a few days. She agreed, and he offered her the couch while he slept in his bed. During her stay, Estibaliz helped Ivan with cleaning, shopping, and cooking, and everything seemed fine, until he discovered her identity through a newspaper article. This revelation shocked and frightened him. He asked her to leave immediately, admitting that he knew she was evading the law. She denied his accusations. He then went to the nearest police station to inform them that Estibaliz, a woman wanted by the authorities was in his home. Even was surprised to find Estebalis waiting for the police at his house. She did not resist arrest. She was taken into custody as the primary suspect in several murders. She was arrested on June 10, 2011, at 7:30 a.m. in Udine, Italy. After her arrest, Estebalis was taken to the police station for questioning, where she confessed to 2 murders, one in 2008 and another in 2010. She used the same methods for both crimes, but claimed that the second murder was executed more skillfully. Meanwhile, Austrian authorities quickly requested her extradition, while in Italy, forensic experts identified the second victim as Manfred Hinterberger. During her interrogation, she attempted to justify her actions, saying that both men, Holger and Manfred, had subjected her to violence and cruelty. She felt very angry about the way they treated her. She described the murders as a response to the physical and psychological abuse she had suffered. Estebalis admitted that she had attacked Holger and Manfred on the head, then used an electric saw. She told investigators that she killed the first man, Holger, to improve her skills. She took shooting lessons and take a course on how to work with cement to prepare for the second murder, Manfred. At the time of her arrest in Italy, she was pregnant with Ronald's child, and during a medical examination, it was revealed that she was 2 months along. 14 days after her arrest, on June 24, 2011, Estebalis was extradited by an Austrian court and detained on suspicion of involvement in 2 murders. Her lawyer argued that although police testimony is considered legal evidence under Italian law, Austrian law is very different. He asked that it not be admitted as evidence in her case. He said he planned to sue several Austrian tabloids for making the accusations against her. Estebalis was arrested and held in a prison in Vienna until January 11, 2012, when she was taken to the hospital to give birth. After her son was born, he was immediately given to his father. From the start of the trial, Estebalis admitted her guilt, while the prosecution and psychiatrists portrayed her as a ruthless, manipulative, and selfish individual. Despite being educated and fluent in 3 languages, she committed extreme acts for her own benefit. The defense argued that Estebalis was a victim of her own emotions. They claimed she was under the influence of illegal drugs and prescribed medications, stating she took 5 different drugs 3 times a day, including antidepressants and treatments for schizophrenia. However, evidence showed that her actions were intentional. She testified that Manfred pressured her to undergo numerous cosmetic surgeries, including nose jobs and Botox, and forced her to exercise constantly to maintain her figure, despite her long 12-hour shifts at the ice cream parlor. Estebalis alleged that people mocked her, which became unbearable for her, and ultimately led to her decision to kill Manfred. The psychiatrist explained that she simply didn't know how to reject men who made her unhappy. She resorted to an extreme solution. She believed the easiest way to deal with men who were no longer needed was to kill them. Whenever men brought her trouble or ridiculed her, she concluded that killing them was the best option. On November 22, 2012, Estebalis Carranza was found guilty of murdering Holger Holtz in 2008 and Manfred Hinterberger in 2010. She was sentenced to life imprisonment in a facility for the criminally insane. Along with her attorneys, she appealed the decision, but the sentence was upheld by the Higher Regional Court of Vienna on March 20, 2013. In November 2017, it was announced that Estebalis would be transferred from a women's prison in Lower Austria to a prison in the market town of Upper Austria. She was diagnosed with a serious personality disorder. She exhibited abnormal behavior and had a mindset akin to a princess seeking rescue from a prince, longing for a fictional world where she was the center of attention. At the time of her crime, Estebalis was mentally stable, as she was not under the influence of drugs and was fully aware of her actions. Psychiatrists expressed concern that she might commit serious crimes again after her release. During a psychiatric evaluation, she stated, Some part of her brain is red, and when it activates, she can't control myself. Hello everyone. Today we will learn about case of Jade Panayotou, who was found dead in 2015 in South Africa. The Jade Panayotou case is one of the most shocking and publicized cases due to its seriousness and complex details. Jade's death was not only a tragic loss but also a wake-up call for marital issues, family conflicts, and motive for crime. In this article, we will explore the details of the case, from the initial context to the important developments and controversial outcome. This tragic story involves a married woman who was unaware of the love triangle she was caught in. The events took place in the city formerly known as Port Elizabeth, which was renamed in February 2021. However, we will refer to it by its old name since the incidents occurred before the renaming. Port Elizabeth is known for its beautiful coastal attractions that draw both local and international tourists. The city also features numerous shopping malls and bars. Additionally, it is unique in South Africa for its diverse wildlife, where you can encounter some of the country's largest animals, including the whale shark, leopard, lion, buffalo, rhinoceros, and elephant. In 2004, an 18-year-old named Christopher Panayotou lived in Port Elizabeth after finishing his schooling. Eager to apply his business skills, he sought opportunities within his father's business, which included several stores in the city, such as Bambi's Diner on Market Street. Christopher was known to be a hard worker with a strong sense for business. At a friend's party, Christopher met an appealing girl named Jade, who was also 18. They chat and quickly began dating, falling in love. Jade was a cheerful and kind-hearted individual, aspiring to become a teacher. In 2005, she enrolled in university, and over the next few years, their relationship deepened as they learned more about each other's dreams. While Jade focused on her studies, Christopher launched his first business, a local grocery store in Algoa Park, followed by a second venture, a restaurant and cocktail bar called Infinity, located nearby. By 2011, the couple appeared more serious. Jade graduated and landed a job at a local elementary school while Christopher's businesses thrived. Eventually, Christopher proposed to Jade. They became officially engaged and moved in together. Unfortunately, their happiness was short-lived, as Christopher was involved in an affair at his store, which Jade remained unaware of. 2 years prior to these events, Christopher hired a young woman named Chanel Coots. Initially, their relationship was strictly professional, but by 2012, everything changed. Christopher and Chanel began a secret affair. Not long after, their co-workers noticed extraordinary signs of affection between them. The couple spent nights together in local hotels. And whenever Jade was away, Christopher would invite Chanel to his home. It is unclear how long this affair would have continued, but Christopher's father, Konstantinos Panayotou, eventually discovered the situation. Konstantinos was furious because he had seen Jade as a future daughter-in-law. Over the 8 years he had known her, Konstantinos had come to appreciate Jade's dedication, hard work, and kindness, he recognizing her potential. So, Konstantinos threatened to disinherit Christopher if he did not end the affair or leave Jade for Chanel. As a successful businessman in Port Elizabeth, Konstantinos intended for his business to be passed down to Christopher, who was just beginning his career. After a heated discussion with his father, Christopher promised to end things with Chanel, but he did not follow through, and their affair continued even more intensely. Throughout this time, Jade remained completely unaware of what was happening. Eventually, he and Jade officially married in 2012, becoming Mr. and Mrs. Panayotou. They appeared to be a beautiful couple that many envied, but soon circumstances would change their lives dramatically. Jade received great news. She got a teaching position at a nearby college. In contrast, Christopher's business has been struggling. Revenues in his store and restaurant decreased, with financial indicators were in the red for several months. This has made it difficult for he to support both women in his life. He spent a lot on expensive gifts for Chanel, covered hotel stays, and even bought gifts for his mistress's best friend to keep her silent about their relationship. These significant expenses have impacted his bank account, prompting him to work longer hours to make ends meet. From 2012 to 2015, Christopher grew increasingly distant from his wife, Jade. Business consumed much of his time and energy as he worked to establish it. He felt he always had a reason to be at his store and focused on work. Jade began to realize that she was feeling lonely. Her husband had little time for her. When she spoke with friends, she mentioned how rarely she saw Christopher, and when he was home, he seemed preoccupied with other thoughts. Jade tried to encourage him to have dinner at home, and even she visited the store to spend time together, but these efforts were insufficient. By September 2014, she recognized that her self-control was slipping and that she was on the verge of a breakdown. On September 21, Jade wrote a letter to herself expressing her feelings. In it, she conveyed her longing for love and a husband who would prioritize her, care for her. She questioned why she couldn't find happiness and why Christopher seemed to hide so much from her, making communication difficult. She felt as though her heart had been taken from her or was in pieces. Writing this letter helped her realize she loved Christopher and how much she wanted to spend time with him. Those close to Jade noticed her loneliness. One day, a best friend was asked by Christopher for birthday gift ideas. She suggested that Jade just wanted to have quality time with him. He recognized the issues in his relationship with Jade, but he still was focused on his business. And he was also distracted by thoughts of another woman. On April 21, 2015, Jade went missing. It was a Tuesday, a normal working day for her. She was expected at work at the college, which was 40 minutes away by car from her home in Wall Glen. Typically, Jade would carpool with her friend and colleague Sherry, and this day should have been no different. Jade left her house at 6:15 a.m. to wait for her friend. However, when Sherry arrived, Jade was not there. Her phone went unanswered, and no one responded to the doorbell. Concerned, Sherry decided to call the police. By 10 a.m., a missing person notice was shared on social media, and many news outlets began reporting on the situation. The police launched a large-scale search that same day, deploying multiple teams and canine units. However, by sunset, they still had no leads on Jade's whereabouts. In that situation, her family offered a reward of 50,000 rand for any information that could help find her, which increased to 150,000 rand by nightfall. As the search for Jade intensified thanks to the efforts of volunteers and caring individuals, tragic news emerged at 10:00 in the morning. A police officer reported that, with the help of his canine unit, he had found a body located in an overgrown area near a gravel road, not far from Kwana Bush. Unfortunately, forensic experts quickly confirmed that the body was indeed Jade's. She was fully clothed and had suffered attacked by force wounds with 2 to the back and 1 to the head. Additionally, her bank cards and jewelry were missing. Relatives were deeply saddened by the news. Friends and relatives openly wept. Jade's sister nearly fainted when the news reached her. Christopher was there at the time. Students and colleagues mourned the loss of their kind and caring teacher. The heartbreak resonated throughout South Africa and was widely shared on social media. However, one of the most important and pressing questions about Jade's death still needed to be answered. Why did Jade have to die? There appeared to be no clear motive for her murder. The very next day, the police published 2 pictures from surveillance cameras and discovered that, on the day of Jade's death, her bank cards had been used in 2 different locations. The cameras recorded 2 images, but none of Jade's relatives recognized the individuals in the photos. A week later, family and friends gathered for Jade's funeral at a Catholic church in Newton Park. Many people attended to share their grief and say their goodbyes, including numerous students and all of her relatives. Everybody were moved by the heartfelt tributes to Jade, the late wife of Christopher. Meanwhile, Christopher's display of sadness seemed odd and insincere. The investigators was revealed that his expressions of despair had been carefully rehearsed. They think Christopher searched through Google for the text of a farewell speech and came across a dedication from Charles Atkins to his own late wife, so the two speeches have a lot in common. While borrowing someone else's speech was inappropriate, it didn't necessarily indicate Christopher's guilt. He was simply struggling to express genuine feelings. Meanwhile, other worrying developments were happening to him. One day before the funeral, the police arrested a man named Sione in connection with Jade's murder. Sione was identified as a bouncer at Christopher's nightclub. Rumors began to circulate that Sione had either orchestrated the crime and confessed while in custody. Another rumor that he claimed Christopher had asked him to hire a hitman to kill Jade, although Sione would not have committed the crime himself, but he knew a couple of friends who might agree to such this request. That marked a significant breakthrough in the investigation. But there was still no evidence linking Christopher to the crime. The police needed more than just rumors to substantiate the serious accusation against him. To gather more evidence, the police devised a plan. They would release Sione from custody on the condition that he speak with Christopher, record any confession regarding the murder of Jade. In exchange, the police promised to ease Sione's sentence and negotiate on many other issues. The next day, Sione called Christopher, and their conversation led the police to draw important conclusions. Christopher was arrested 2 hours after the phone call. Following this new information, 3 additional suspects were apprehended. While Christopher denied any involvement in his wife's death, the investigation revealed that he had asked his bodyguard from the club to arrange the murder. Sione had then recruited 3 hitmen for the task. Christopher instructed them to execute the plan early in the morning at 6:30, while Jade was waiting for a co-worker who was supposed to drive her to work. He intended to stage the murder as a robbery at the Glen Walls gates, planning to steal all her possessions. The execution date was originally set for April 20, 2015. However, while the hired killers were preparing to carry out the order, one of their girlfriends showed up, prompting them to postpone the execution to another day. This delay upset Christopher, who insisted that the execution take place as soon as possible. Therefore, the following day was scheduled. On April 21, Jade arrived outside her village at 6:15 a.m., where 3 killers were already waiting in a rented car just a short distance away. They decided against killing her immediately due to concerns about potential witnesses. Instead, they opted to kidnap her and take her to a different location to carry out the murder. Jade was taken to the back seat of the car, which drove northwest from the village for about 30 minutes. Upon arrival, the killers pulled her from the car and attacked her 3 times by force. She died from the 3rd bullet. One of the criminals then went to a nearby ATM and withdrew 1,000 rand, approximately $100. Later that day, they attempted to withdraw cash again, but the transaction failed due to an incorrect PIN. Both withdrawal attempts were recorded on surveillance cameras. The magistrate's court will try all 4 criminals together, excluding the bouncer Sione, who has already faced a different punishment. Mysteriously, before the trial began, one of the hitmen died, leaving the remaining 2 and Christopher to face charges for the crime. On October 11, 2015, the trial against Christopher and 2 mercenaries began. The prosecution argued that Christopher murdered Jade because he could not afford to support both his wife and his mistress, leading him to want her out of the picture. In contrast, Christopher's defense claimed that he had a kind heart and would never commit such an act, especially since he had just bought a new house for himself and Jade. They asserted that Christopher had no reason to kill his wife. Christopher's mistress, Chanel, testified about the expensive gifts he had given her and confirmed that she had spent the night with him in the penthouse while Jade was away. Evidence was presented showing also their illicit encounters at local hotels. The prosecution presented various pieces of evidence, including phone calls between the hired killers and Christopher's bouncers, ATM photos, GPS coordinates, hidden cars, and other incriminating materials. On November 2, 2017, when turned 31, Christopher Panayotou was found guilty of murdering his wife. Investigative agency was revealed that he was seeking a loan of 2.5 million rand, which he had no intention of using for his wife or mistress. The judge concluded Christopher regretted his marriage to Jade, so killed her to cut costs and reduce his ever-growing debt. Because of his cruel actions, the judge sentenced Christopher to life in prison without mercy. The two hired killers also received life sentences, while Sioni awaited his own sentence. Unfortunately, Luthando Sioni's testimony was hostile. After a series of trials, Sioni was convicted by the Gqeberha High Court on 25 November 2021 and was sentenced to life imprisonment on 26 November 2021. The story ultimately focuses on themes of betrayal and greed. Jade was a genuinely good person with a heart of gold. She was dedicated to her cause and the people around her, always maintaining a positive attitude, a vibrant personality, and a beautiful smile. She deserved much more in life than what her husband took from her. On December 9, 2019, Christopher's father, who opposed his son's affair with Chanel, tragically lost his life. He was shot multiple times near his store while closing for the night, and his car was stolen. The murder of Christopher Panayotou overshadowed earlier events and devastated two families. This tragedy stemmed from the actions of a selfish man who prioritized his pride and money over his wife's life. It remains uncertain whether he bears responsibility for his father's death. Society hopes that Christopher will spend the rest of his life in prison, filled with regret and despair. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case, the case of Roxanne Wood. The only evidence found at the crime scene was a drop of semen. It took 35 years for the victim's relatives to discover who brutally took the life of their loved one. Roxanne Woods was born on April 15, 1956, in the small town of Nels, Michigan. She was the first child in the family, followed by younger sister Janet. When Roxanne was 16, her younger brother Brad was born. Then their parents' marriage began to deteriorate. When Brad was 2 years old, her parents separated and filed for divorce. The children had to split their time between their mother's and father's homes. So Roxanne took on the role of caring for and comforting her younger siblings, Janet and Brad. Roxanne had a challenging life, but she was cheerful, friendly, and sociable as she grew up. After completing her studies at the age of 17, she started working as a manager at a small company that manufactured steel tanks, specifically in the customer service department. One day, a handsome young man came to the office. When she first saw him, Roxanne complimented him, then they had a conversation. The young man's name was Terry Wood, and he was the boss's son. When Roxanne got home after work, she excitedly told younger sister that it was the happiest day of her life because she had met a wonderful boy and had fallen in love with him at first sight. Roxanne and Terry began dating, and 8 years later, in 1982, they got married. The couple settled into a home in their hometown of Nels, Michigan. Both worked as managers in the customer service department of Terry's father's company. Their daily routine consisted of waking up, having breakfast, and going to work together in the same office. They would return home for lunch, take a break, go back to work, and then come home together in the evening. Roxanne tells Terry that she feels suffocated by their constant togetherness. She believes that it is damaging their relationship, leading to boring arguments. Roxanne left her father-in-law's company and found a job as a manager at a plastic parts manufacturer in South Bend, Indiana. The brief separation during the day helped her and her husband maintain their relationship, and everything was going well. They began to live a normal life together. In her free time, Roxanne enjoyed cooking and often baked a variety of sweet pastries. She also loved growing roses in their yard, as she appreciated creating beauty around her. 5 years passed, and during this time, the Roxanne family remained childless. The couple continued to live together, work and manage the household, unaware of the tragic fate that awaited them. On Thursday, February 19, 1987, Roxanne and Terry went to work as usual. In the evening, they each drove separately to a restaurant in downtown Niles to meet for dinner. After dinner, they decided to relax at a local bowling club with some friends. When Roxanne entered the club with Terry, she quickly attracted the attention of everyone around her because of her attractiveness and elegance. The couple enjoyed a night of bowling at the club, which was mostly filled with men. After 11 o'clock, Roxanne told her husband that it was time to go home because she had to get up early for work the next day. Terry wanted to stay and play one last round. Roxanne hugged him, kissed him, and said she was going home. Terry said goodbye and reminded her to drive carefully. Roxanne left alone while Terry stayed at the club to play one more round before driving home. He returned home about 45 minutes after Roxanne and assumed she was asleep. Terry parked his car in the garage and went into the kitchen. Terry witnessed a horrifying scene. His wife, Roxanne, lying on the floor in a pool of blood, her panties down to her ankles. Terry rushed to her side, hoping she was still alive. He lifted her head and tried to check her pulse, but quickly realized she was dead. In a panic, he rushed to the phone. He slipped on the bloody floor but managed to stay on his feet. He called the local police station and shouted into the phone, saying that his wife was dead in the house. Terry screamed and asked the police to come quickly, right now. The police asked Terry to calm down because they did not understand what he was saying. Terry's aggressive behavior on the phone was alarming, and when the police arrived at the Terry family home, Roxanne's death caused him to explode in rage, screaming uncontrollably. The police were forced to put him in the back of a patrol car and take him to the station for questioning. When they arrived, Terry immediately requested a lawyer, which raised further suspicions among the police. The autopsy revealed that 30-year-old Roxanne Wood had died from a stab wound to the neck. Forensic experts found only one piece of evidence at the crime scene, a drop of semen. In 1987, DNA testing had not been conducted, so the evidence was stored in the archives. During their search of the house, police found no signs of forced entry. Terry told police that they had a problem with the back door of their home, saying it was not working properly. Roxanne was found on the floor next to the kitchen cabinets, and the cutlery drawer was open. A fillet knife was missing, leading police to believe that it was the weapon used in the crime. Police found it strange that an intruder could enter the home without a weapon. When police looked into Roxanne's case, all information pointed to her husband, Terry, as the suspect. The investigation into the couple revealed that both Terry and Roxanne had been unfaithful to each other. When the police discovered this, they considered jealousy as a possible motive for the crime, especially on Terry's part. However, Roxanne's relatives did not believe Terry was capable of such violence. Although they acknowledged that he could be rude, yell, and insult others, they did not think he would commit such a brutal act. They believed that someone else was responsible for the crime. Despite their suspicions, the prosecutor's office determined that there was insufficient evidence to charge Terry with Roxanne's death. After the investigation, there were still no new clues, so the investigation was stalled. For many years, the case remained unsolved. Many Nelson residents blamed Terry for Roxanne's death. He was often cursed in public, with people calling him a beast and a monster. Despite this, Terry continued to live in Nelson, working for his father's company, keeping his personal life private and avoiding contact with journalists. A year after the tragedy, in 1988, Roxanne's younger sister Janet married Terry's brother, Robert Wood, who also worked at their father's steel tank manufacturing company. Janet and Robert were the only ones still actively searching for the criminal, even though the police had given up and believed the case would never be solved. In 1999, there was a significant development in DNA research related to the Roxanne Wood case, which had stagnated for 12 years. A DNA sample from the crime scene was added to the National DNA Database, but no matches were found. Terry, Roxanne's husband, agreed to provide his DNA for comparison, but it also did not match the sample from the crime scene. 20 years went by, during which a significant amount of information was gathered regarding the case. In 2020, police brought in a professor and a group of students from Western Michigan University to digitize the case materials and enter them into an electronic database. The students worked on roughly 3,500 pages of handwritten reports, notes, and other relevant information. The professor noted that after 30 years of collecting data, police may have overlooked important details during the investigation. Around the same time the students started digitizing the data, the police investigating Roxanne's case reached out to a company that specializes in genetic genealogy. However, a new issue arose. The semen samples from the crime scene were poorly preserved. The usable portion was only about 3% of the amount normally needed for research. They had never worked with such a small amount before. However, the researchers still tried to identify the criminal's DNA. The experts spent about 10 months on the project, but were ultimately unable to produce any results. Their efforts were in vain. The president of the genealogy company was very upset about the failure of the project. One day, the president of the genealogy company discussed this issue with his employee, Gabriela Vargas, and asked her to take over the project, promising to support its progress. In April 2021, Gabriela began her work. Colleagues considered Gabriela to be one of the most talented researchers in genetics. A few months later, Gabriela created a genetic profile using DNA analysis. She quickly discovered that the man was of Balkan Caucasian origin. Using the online service GetMac, Gabriela was able to build the criminal's family tree. Police identified the killer's parents, a couple born around 1920 who had 3 sons. This meant their sons were likely born in the 1940s and 1950s. With information from Gabriela, police quickly identified 3 brothers, eliminating 2 as suspects. That left only one brother, who had a significant criminal record. Michigan State Police believe they have finally identified Roxanne Wood's killer after 34 years, Patrick Gilham. In 2021, Patrick Gilham, 66, lived just a few miles from Roxanne Wood in South Bend, Indiana, where she also worked. Patrick was an alcoholic and a drug addict. When police looked into his criminal record, they discovered that 8 years before Roxanne was murdered, he had been charged with assaulting another woman. Back in 1979, a young mother named Maureen Farrick lived in Gary, Indiana, with her husband Robert and their 2 daughters, ages 3 and 2. Maureen was an art teacher at a local high school. Robert described his wife as beautiful, kind, and social, always ready to help others. In September 1979, as Robert's business trip was coming to an end, he planned to return home late that evening. He called his wife, informing her that he didn't have the house keys, and asked her to leave the side door unlocked for him. After 11 p.m., as Robert was walking home, he noticed several police cars parked near his house. Morin ran out and told him that a stranger had attacked her that night. She was sleeping on the second floor with her daughters when she heard noises coming from downstairs. Concerned, she decided to investigate and went downstairs to see what was going on. She noticed a man going through her purse. When he saw her, he pushed her to the ground near the stairs and tried to attack her, but he was unsuccessful. He eventually stole her purse and escaped. Morin remained silent throughout the incident, fearing that her daughters, who were sleeping on the second floor, would wake up. After the attacker left, she called the police and provided a description of him. About a week later, Patrick, 24, was stopped by police for a traffic violation. An officer noticed credit cards next to him that belonged to Morin Farrick. Patrick was arrested and taken to the police station. During questioning, he explained that he had entered Morin's house through an open side door and that he had stolen her purse. In 1979, Patrick Gillum was charged with burglary and unlawful deviant behavior. He pleaded guilty at his trial and was sentenced to 14 years in prison. However, he served only 7 years in an Indiana prison before being released on parole for good behavior. In 2021, police began searching for Patrick Gillum to collect a DNA sample to compare with the profile of the criminal in Roxanne's case. In May 2021, they found Patrick Gillum, 66, in South Bend, Indiana. While driving his pickup truck, he threw a cigarette butt out the window. Police took the cigarette butt, which contained his saliva, and sent it for analysis. A few days later, the test results did not match, surprising the police. They were certain that Patrick was involved in Roxanne Wood's case. They then decided to take another DNA sample from Patrick, suspecting that they might have accidentally taken the wrong cigarette butt. In July 2021, Patrick was under continuous observation. One day, he visited a laundromat, and a police watching him decided to wait nearby, believing Patrick would eventually come out. The police positioned himself on the sidewalk next to the laundromat. His prediction came true when Patrick stepped outside, lit a cigarette, and sat just a meter away from police, unaware that he was being watched. The police greeted Patrick and they exchanged a few words. After about 2 minutes, Patrick returned to the laundromat, leaving behind a cigarette butt. The police collected the cigarette butt with gloves, bagged it, and sent it for forensic analysis. The analysis showed a near 100% match, but the police decided not to immediately arrest Patrick. Instead, they planned to bring him in for questioning. Patrick was told that the police needed to discuss an old case with him. During Patrick's questioning, the police asked him if he knew anyone named Roxanne. He replied that he knew 2 people by that name. One was a stripper, and the other was an alcoholic. They then showed him a picture of Roxanne and asked if he recognized her. He said he had never met her. They showed him both old and new pictures, but he continued to deny ever seeing her. When the police informed Patrick of what had happened to Roxanne, he became anxious. His body tensed, his hands shook, and he slammed his hands on the table, seemingly hoping that the interrogation would end. Throughout the interrogation, Patrick maintained his innocence, often answering questions with phrases like, "He don't remember" or "He don't know." The interrogation lasted for 5.5 hours. Eventually, Patrick stated that he needed a lawyer and he was allowed to go home. 7 months later, in February 2022, Patrick was arrested at his home in South Bend, Indiana. Around the same time, nearly all local media reported on the reopening of this high-profile case. Following this, a woman contacted the police to share a story she had kept to herself for nearly 35 years. In the summer of 1987, just a few months after Roxanne Wood's death, Patrick attempted to attack another victim in South Bend. It was an evening when Rose Perel decided to water her garden. While she was outside with a hose, she heard a car drive by. A Chevrolet El Camino stopped near her house. Rose initially ignored it, but when she finished watering and turned to go inside, she noticed a man wearing a black baseball cap and a black beard getting out of the car and walking toward her. Rose sensed that the stranger intended to harm her, so instead of returning to her house, she ran to her neighbors for safety. Thankfully, they quickly opened the door and allowed her in. Trembling with fear, Rose called the police, but by that time, the unknown man had already disappeared. A few days later, while driving around town with her husband, Rose spotted the same Chevrolet El Camino parked at a gas station. There was nobody inside the vehicle. Rose's husband decided to keep watch over the empty car while she went to find a phone to call the police. When Rose returned, she found her husband confronting the stranger. Her husband held a gun and told him to stay put. The man was 32 years old, with dark hair and a thick beard. Rose asked him to show her his driver's license. She read out his name, Patrick Gilham. Rose and her husband then allowed Patrick to leave, but warned him that they would use force if he came near their home again. Rose then went to the local police station and reported her situation, also naming Patrick Gilham. She never saw him again and believes the police took no action. It wasn't until 35 years later that Rose recognized Patrick on the news and decided to share her story. She believes that if the police had taken her testimony seriously in 1987, the Roxanne Wood case could have been solved much sooner. In April 2022, Patrick's trial finally occurred. He did not confess to the crime and claimed he had no memory of the events. When Janet Wood spoke during the trial, Patrick appeared horrified as he looked at her. Janet and Roxanne resembled each other closely, leading some to believe that Patrick thought he was face to face with Roxanne, which frightened him. Ultimately, Patrick Gilham was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 19 years. All suspicion was cleared against Roxanne's husband, Terry Wood. Terry was emotional and confused, crying in the courtroom. For 35 years, he had been the prime suspect in his wife's murder, and now justice had been served. He continued to avoid the press and kept his private life private. Roxanne's family finally found peace. Her siblings Janet and Brad were relieved to learn the truth. Janet shared that after the trial, she had a dream in which she and Roxanne were walking near the cemetery gates. They were laughing and talking, as Roxanne told Janet that it was time for her to leave. She reassured her loved ones not to worry or cry, saying that she was fine. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Noir Lalande. On August 26, 2017, in Le Pont de Beauvoisin, Isère, a wedding ceremony was taking place. During the ceremony, no one realized that a stranger had quietly appeared and joined in the joyful atmosphere. He only knew a few people at the ceremony, and he seemed to have his own plans. Among the guests was 8-year-old Maelis Araujo. While everyone was having fun, their mood suddenly changed when Maelis disappeared. This made her family panic. They searched but could not find her. They contacted the police for help. Soon after, the police team arrived and began the search. They searched the entire area and all possible locations she might have gone to. Search dogs and a helicopter from nearby Grenoble were deployed, and additional support was called in. Maelis was not the first child to go missing in the area. Between 2007 and 2017, there were numerous disappearances, many of which went unreported or were closed without any leads. No one knows what happened to these children. It is likely that one or more individuals are the perpetrators. The incident left everyone in France very worried. Parents handed out flyers, and local shopkeepers put up posters of Maelis in their storefronts. The community was aware of previous disappearances in the area, and so were the local gendarmes. However, At first, no one connected Melis's disappearance to the earlier cases. Despite rumors of a serial killer, the police had yet to apprehend a suspect for a decade. This was because these criminals often operated according to a certain pattern. The missing individuals seemed to vanish without a trace, and most search efforts yielded no results. When Melis disappeared, people began to wonder if all these cases could be linked. This raised another pressing question. Why had the authorities been unable to find any clues until now? This has caused public outrage, and they have accused the police of ineffectiveness. 5 days after Melis went missing, the police had no leads. Detectives tried to comfort her family, but they knew the chances of finding her alive were very low, given the time that had passed. Then, a man named Ludovic came forward. He was a guest at the wedding and believed he had important information for the investigation. Ludovic was a close friend of 30-year-old Nordal Lelandais. Ludovic explained that he had crashed the wedding. He didn't have an invitation but attended in place of his cousin, who was invited but could not come. His behavior seemed suspicious to the other guests, but they assumed he was just drunk. He eventually agreed to go back to the table, but then vanished. Nordal was so intelligent that even Melis's mother did not realize something was wrong until it was too late. Ludovic thought Nordal should be investigated. Although they had only briefly met, he had gained the trust of many guests. Throughout the evening, he had come across as friendly and approachable. Melis's mother even had a brief chat with him about her family's 3 dogs. He later offered to show Melis his dogs, which made her mother let her guard down. Her mother later admitted that she never thought her child would get into a car with a complete stranger in the middle of the night without telling her parents. There were a lot of people present, so it was puzzling that Melis could disappear without anyone noticing. The kidnapper clearly took steps to hide their actions. One guest recalled seeing Melis exit through the back door alone. Her parents last saw her around 2:30 a.m. When they realized she was missing, they immediately began searching for her. By that time, Nordal had already left, but soon returned. He approached Melis's mother, expressing surprise at the situation. When she asked if he had seen her daughter, he calmly said he had no idea where she was. He offered to help with the search, but then claimed he felt sick from the wine he had consumed. In another case, Eric Frey, 48, moved to Le Pont de Beauvoisin, Isère, with his girlfriend in 2016. They had a serious relationship and big plans for the future. However, shortly after moving in, Eric suddenly disappeared. He walked to a bakery just 15 minutes from their home but never returned. He left his belongings behind and took only a bank card, which suggested he would return soon. His girlfriend and a neighbor searched the area but couldn't reach him by phone. After several hours of searching, his girlfriend went to the police station to report him missing. Unfortunately, the officers were skeptical and advised her to wait 48 hours before filing an official report, reasoning that he was an adult who could have left on his own. Not wanting to wait long, she initiated her own investigation and requested CCTV footage from the bakery. The video showed Eric buying bread and chatting briefly with the cashier. It was clear he disappeared on his way home. She then contacted the police again, but they still found nothing. A year later, in 2017, she came across a news report about another disappearance, Melis's disappearance. She immediately thought that her boyfriend's case and Melis's case might be connected, potentially involve the same perpetrator. Eric's girlfriend believed that the bakery's surveillance cameras could provide a vital clue to the case. The police examined the footage and compared it to the wedding guest list to find any matches. During the investigation, a witness, Erica, provided information suggesting Nordal's possible involvement in the case, and this information was reported in the media. She studied his photo carefully for a while. She then reviewed the videos and noticed a striking resemblance that seemed more than just a coincidence. At the same time, France was facing a serious problem. The number of disappearances was increasing. This rise had made the public worried and angry, as it seemed that criminals were becoming bolder. In Chambéry, about 4 months before Melis's disappearance, the body of 20-year-old Arthur Noir was found in a river and was determined to have drowned. However, his family disagreed with that conclusion from the inquest. The police discovered that from April 11 to 12, 2017, Arthur had left a local nightclub around 1 a.m. The last person to see him was the nightclub manager, who observed him walking toward the barracks. Since the distance was quite far, Arthur decided to walk along the road, hoping someone would give him a ride. The manager witnessed him flag down a car and get in after asking for a ride. However, he never arrived at his military unit the next morning, leading to his classification as a deserter. Authorities found a trail hundreds of meters from where Arthur got into the car. After reviewing surveillance footage, they uncovered a lead. The car that picked him up had been parked near the nightclub for hours, with the driver apparently waiting for someone. When Arthur appeared on the road, the driver drove off to give him a ride. This raised suspicions, but they could not identify the make or license plate of the car. This was the only lead in the search for Arthur until his body was eventually discovered in the river. His family firmly rejected the idea that he would have deserted the military, as he was passionate about his work and wanted to pursue a military career. Arthur had no prior legal issues. He was generally a friendly person with no history of running away, mental health disorders, or addictions. He also had no conflicts with anyone. Strangely, the police initially took no action. They didn't even examine Arthur's mobile phone until much later, when the search operation began. It was discovered that he had been near a roundabout at 3 a.m., close to a nightclub. Just 4 minutes later, his phone was found 6 kilometers away, and 5 minutes after that, it was located 11 kilometers from the roundabout. Given the time and distance, it was clear that Arthur had been in the kidnapper's car during this period. This information led investigators to identify the mobile phone of the driver. The phone belonged to Noir Lelandais, who was driving an Audi A3 at the time. Unfortunately, the nightclub manager, who saw the car stop, couldn't accurately identify its make. The car was searched, but Noir denied any involvement in the kidnapping and appeared arrogant. He seemed to feel uncatchable, a trait often found in serial killers. During interrogation, he spoke confidently, demonstrating impressive powers of persuasion. The detectives who worked with him were taken aback. They had difficulty extracting any information from him. Just a few hours after Arthur disappeared, Noir visited a car wash, where he spent over 2 hours cleaning the interior and exterior of his car. His behavior raised suspicions. He was supposedly preparing the car for sale, meticulously removing any stains. Surveillance footage from the car wash showed that he focused particularly on the front passenger seat, spending about half an hour on it. Additionally, he took all the napkins and rags he used for cleaning with him, instead of discarding them in the car wash's trash, which also seemed odd. Noir insisted that his actions were normal and justified by his preparations for the car sale. Noir has 3 large dogs, which cause hair and dirt to accumulate in the interior of his car. He likely realized that the detectives had no solid evidence against him, allowing him to manipulate the situation to his advantage. During questioning, he remained calm, delivering clear and convincing answers, all while accompanied by his lawyer. Despite his suspicions, the police released him due to lack of evidence, and they continued to investigate further. They later discovered that he was actively posting on social media, sharing content that included videos of himself with illegal substances. He openly claimed to be involved in the sale and use of these banned substances on his profiles. As it turns out, Noir Lelandais has a criminal record, having been arrested in 2009 for theft and vandalism. However, he was well liked and described by many as a good person. Friends and acquaintances would never have suspected that he could be a serial killer. He was very good at charming people. which probably helped him gain their trust. Sadly, this ability may have contributed to the disappearance of his 13th victim, Lucy Rue. She had been missing for 5 years before Melis disappeared. At 34, she was receiving treatment for phobias at a local psychiatric clinic. She attended therapy during the day and returned home in the evening. One September morning, she left home without any identification or personal belongings and was never seen again. Like other cases, the investigation into Lucy's disappearance found no leads. It seemed she had vanished without a trace. By the end of 2017, Lucy's sister, Natalie, was already aware of Nordahl. She immediately suspected a link between him and Lucy's disappearance after discovering that Lucy had gone missing in roughly the same area where another victim was later found. Unfortunately, just as in previous cases, law enforcement did not take Lucy's case seriously, possibly because of her mental health issues. Years later, investigators finally tracked down a person who was with Lucy at the psychiatric clinic. They discovered that Nordahl was also there for treatment during that time. The two often shared meals in the cafeteria. A witness said he was particularly attentive to her. She was the 13th victim and was described as a beautiful girl who managed to attract his attention. Soon after, she disappeared without a trace. Police began to notice a pattern as they investigated. It became clear that the missing people were related to the neighborhood where Nordahl lived. The attacks occurred within a 25-kilometer radius of his home. Most of the victims were local residents or tourists visiting nearby areas, and many of them knew each other. Nordahl appeared in several cases, including the disappearance of an elderly woman named Georgette, a person who went missing while walking. He even actively participated in the search, volunteering to help find her. However, there was not enough evidence to charge him. Finally, the detectives began to investigate further. One officer spent hours reviewing footage from the car wash and noticed Nordahl's unusual behavior while cleaning his car. He focused on the trunk of the car, spending 47 minutes there, which aroused suspicion. The car was seized again for a detailed examination. To conduct a thorough analysis, all the interior panels were removed, and investigators spent many hours inspecting the vehicle. They eventually discovered blood stains on the wiring in the trunk. DNA testing confirmed the blood was Melis's, raising questions about how it got into the car. The time had come to question Nordahl again and confront him with difficult questions. He was detained once more and brought in for interrogation. From the very beginning, he seemed prepared for the interrogation. He displayed confidence and arrogance, but his demeanor changed when asked about the blood in the trunk. Faced with undeniable evidence, he confessed within a few hours. He admitted that he left the wedding with Melis because he promised to show her his dogs. He claimed the incident was accidental. He said she began to cry for no reason, which frustrated him. In his anger, he struck her hard on the head, resulting in her immediate death. Police then conducted a thorough search and reviewed surveillance camera footage. The investigation focused on recordings from 247 cameras located along the street. They saw video footage of the car carrying Nordahl and Melis. In the footage, she appears frightened, pressing against the locked door, trying to get away from Nordahl. Other recordings show him getting out of the car, seemingly lost in thought, while she is motionless and possibly dead. Nordahl eventually agrees to reveal where he hid Melis's body. However, when they arrived at a remote area near an abandoned factory, he began to act confused and pretended to forget where he had buried her. He led the police in circles for nearly an entire day, and by evening, he still had not disclosed the burial site. Eventually, they found her skull and her clothing. At that moment, he suddenly knelt down and cried loudly. However, his expression seemed insincere. However, the investigation by law enforcement was just beginning. They discovered that Nordahl had left the wedding with Melis at 2:46 a.m. and had put his cell phone on airplane mode to avoid being tracked. He was gone for less than an hour, during which he assaulted her, placed her body in the trunk of his car, and drove to an abandoned factory where he buried her. He then returned to the wedding and, at around 4 a.m., pretended to be drunk to create an alibi without arousing suspicion. Detectives noted a significant issue. He had too little time to accomplish everything he needed to do. This leads them to believe that he actually returned to the wedding with Melis' body still in the trunk. After coming back, he seemed anxious that the police might ask him to open the trunk. The discovery of Melis' body, however, did not provide many answers. By that time, it had completely decomposed, and only skeletal remains were found. The forensic expert could not determine the exact cause of death, and the injuries she sustained were impossible to evaluate. The forensic expert noted that she had a broken nose and jaw, but these injuries were not severe enough to cause death. There were no signs of weapon wounds on the bones, leading them to believe that Nordahl may have acted out of anger when she screamed, causing him to lose control. In Arthur's case, Nordahl admitted to killing Arthur on March 29. He said that an argument had broken out in the car, which led to a fight, and Arthur fell out of the car. According to Nordahl, the fall was the cause of death, and he considered it an accident. However, investigators had a different opinion. Although there may have been an argument between them, Nordahl deliberately chose Arthur as his victim. That night he was like a predator. He may have used sleeping pills to control Arthur, but there is not enough evidence to suggest he intended to kill beforehand. This led to the maximum sentence being 30 years instead of life. At the trial, on the prosecution side, a woman named Monique, who had actually escaped from Nordahl, testified. She did not want to contact the police to report him because she feared for her safety. However, she ultimately decided to tell her story to help the prosecution put him away for a long time. According to her, at about 10 a.m., one day in July 2014, she arrived at a store where she saw a stranger in the parking lot. He was sitting in a dark Audi A3 and greeted her. She replied that she was not interested in making new acquaintances and entered the store to make her purchases. Monique realized that the man was constantly following her. He trailed her throughout the store but didn't purchase anything, raising her suspicions. When she left the store and went to another one, he followed her again. After leaving the second store, he still chased her by car, but the distance between them grew further and further. When she reached the police station, she asked for their help, believing that their intervention would save her from a dangerous situation. Unfortunately, the police showed little concern and felt powerless to act because there was no clear evidence of a crime. At home, Monique told her son the story, but it was only when she read about Nordahl in the newspaper that she realized it was him. Numerous articles described his aggressive personality, including instances of domestic violence, stalking, and harassment. During the trial, Melis's parents sought answers about their daughter's fate, ready to hear any truth, and they expected Nordahl to provide a thorough account of the incident. However, he did not provide the truth, as all of his testimony contradicted what had actually happened. Nordahl claimed he was in a panic and experiencing hallucinations, believing that the spirit of Arthur, one of his previous victims, had taken over his body, compelling him to kill Melis. However, his testimony was dismissed as not credible. The prosecution believes that abuse was the main motive behind Melis's kidnapping, claiming that he abused and then killed her. Unfortunately, her body was badly decomposed, making it impossible for investigators to confirm these suspicions. On May 11, 2021, Nordahl Leylandé was convicted of murdering Arthur Noir and received a 20-year prison sentence. A year later, he was found guilty of kidnapping and murdering Melis Araujo, resulting in a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 22 years. Nordahl chose not to appeal his convictions, and authorities are still investigating his potential involvement in other cases. There are several leads, But direct evidence is scarce, and he has not confessed to any additional crimes. During his time in prison, Nordahl took advantage of every opportunity he had. He discovered that prisoners in French prisons retain most rights, except for release, and he began to exploit these privileges. He corresponded with women, charming them as he usually did, and they came to visit him. Using a secret phone, he communicated with teenagers and accessed adult websites. Overall, he created a comfortable life for himself in prison, complete with a refrigerator, TV, and game console. Despite this, Nordahl confided in other inmates about his plan to escape at the end of the year.